I'm Marie Vigourou.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And this is Rude Eats, a delicious podcast where we sink our teeth into every episode of the show Hannibal.
I want Will Graham, I really do. And I think that we could have some fun. Then you can do anything you like. I might even go and help you catch the Shrike. I want Will Graham, I want that man. For every meal and on demand. His mind shines and his body's cut. I know that he works for the FBI, but what other man has pure empathy and the ability to see my mind? Jack, what other thing have I ever asked you for? Besides, never looking into my pantry? And I won't get that either. Damn. I want Will Graham, I want him so. And he really doesn't need to know what's in my meals or on my mind. I just want Will Graham to be mine. I want him and I want him now. I said before, I don't care how. I'll give him tests, he'll draw a clock. And then his dark desires I will unlock. We'll be together, Will and me. We'll throw some grand in the parties. We'll cut the flesh, we'll cook the meat. He'll eat the food just like me. Give me goddamn Will Graham.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Jeremy.
The episode goes crazy this week.
I am just so excited to talk about this with you. Like, I have been like foaming at the mouth to not talk about it too much in DMs because I'm just like, I need to talk about this with you.
Need to have it in person. Don't want to ruin the podcast by having all of our conversations in our DMs. Although, if you just send me like a bunch of exclamation marks, I know that things are happening. So,
I mean, I did send you like a few lines, I think.
Yes,
where I was
yes.
like, ah, just like screams.
you were kind of live blogging the episode to me for a while, and it was great. I loved it.
It was, yes.
I'm super excited to talk about
goodness.
this. I think this is one of the best episodes of Hannibal. It's probably the best episode so far that we've had, and so much stuff happens, and it's going to be so much fun to dig into. Before we get into that, I wanted to do a little bit of admin, if you don't mind.
Of course, please.
So back on August 20th, and this is probably coming out in like 2026 or something. I'm not going to do the math. But back in August 20th, our friend Nell on the Monster of the Week Discord and the Carrie and Wayward Discord, a listener to all of our podcasts, thank you, Nell, mentioned that she had something to say about them referring to Will as high functioning. And I'm just going to read this verbatim. So this is from Nell. So we thought on the term high functioning. The community and increasingly people who do this research tend to use the term support needs instead, so as to put the quote unquote problem on society and not on the individual. So if you're feeling uncomfortable with the term high functioning when it comes to Will, the term low support needs might feel more appropriate. And that generated a whole conversation in the Monster of the Week Discord from people who are on the spectrum and who there was just a big conversation about it, which was super cool to read through. As a person who hasn't been super educated on that stuff, it was very fascinating to read. So I like the idea of using low support needs for Will, because I think even the show sometimes forget that they mentioned that he was on the spectrum in the first episode, right? Like the show was like, oh no, he's fine now. But also he definitely has some support needs.
Oh yes, for sure. He definitely has some support needs. And I think the reason why Nell mentioned this is because I was like, oh, like I don't like the term high functioning, but I guess this is like how the show describes him. And so Nell came in clutch with a better term that does feel a lot more appropriate. So thank you so much, Nell, for letting us know about that.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't remember which one of us reads the episode description. Is that you or me? I forget how this is. I'm doing 8 podcasts right now, so all of my admin is so confused. What do we do?
I feel like we have, because I did it at one point, and then you started doing it, and then I did it again. So I can take it today. That's fine. So today we are covering Hannibal Season 1, Episode 7, Sorbet. The BAU is called when a man is found in a hotel bathtub with his kidney removed, and Graham must determine whether this is the act of an organ harvester or if the Chesapeake Ripper has claimed his first victim in 2 years. Meanwhile, Crawford continues to be haunted by the discovery of Miriam Lass's arm. Dr. Bloom suspects that Crawford has become obsessed with catching the Ripper and is putting Graham in danger by making him chase the Ripper. This episode was directed by James Foley, written by Brian Fuller and Jesse Alexander, and it originally aired on May 9th, 2013.
Yes. So excited to talk about this one. The description does a lot here.
Yes.
Using the word haunted for Jack Crawford is especially fun. We're gonna have a lot of fun talking about that. And so as we do on every episode of the podcast, we talk about the episode title and we kind of relate that to a theme. Tell me what a sorbet is, Mary.
So I had to do a little bit of Googling about that because I know that sorbet, ice cream, and gelato are all like separate things, right? So a sorbet is actually a frozen dessert like ice cream and gelato, but it's typically made of fruit juice or fruit puree mixed with water and sugar. And it's different from ice cream because ice cream is typically made with like a custard base. So that's like cooked eggs with milk, and then we add cream and sugar to it. So sorbet is fruity, which I think is pretty apt for this episode.
when we literally see Hannibal pining over Will as Chopin's D minor plays. Chopin's D minor plays, like Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was so gay in the best way. Like this was so fruity. I love these gay bitches. I love them so much. Anyway, so I didn't really want fruity to be the theme of the episode, even though it really felt right. So I thought about it for a while, and then like when you think of sorbet, you think of like frozen, cold ice, and since the episode also revolves around Hannibal, I assumed that like Brian Fuller wanted us to make an inference there, right? So I thought about like the distance, particularly like the emotional distance that Hannibal creates around him. And he does that through his performance of a normal human being, which we know he is not, right? And I think that given the rest of the episode, I would really like to focus on the theme of performance today.
What a great connection that you made throughout that. Going from a frozen dessert to the theme of performance is really, really great. Love those connections, absolutely. And it fits. Like even in the episode, like we're going to find out that Bedelia, Hannibal's own psychiatrist, points out like he's wearing a person suit. He's literally dressing up and putting on a performance as a human being. And that's not the only performance being made through here. So we're gonna be able to connect this to a lot of the different things that happen. And it is a very fruity episode. I still find it fascinating that because again, based on none of this relationship exists in the books or in the original material, right? Like there was never, to my knowledge, maybe people were shipping it and like there's an AO3 thing that goes back to when the books were released. I don't know, but to my knowledge, there was never really any Hannibal and Will like romantically involved kind of thing at all. And so Brian Fuller to have made this decision at the outset and then to slowly build into this is just so interesting to me. And then yeah, it is a little fruity this episode. sometimes
fruity.
Literally. So.
Yeah. Oh yes, exactly. And there's also the fact that like, let's be honest, if I was like at dinner and they served like a sorbet, I would be like, this is really extra. And I feel like there's so much about this episode that's very extra. Anyway, like I just thought that this is, I don't know, I love the way they're naming their episodes and the way that like they're digging into themes and all that. I think this is my favorite episode so far.
Yeah, it's really good. It's super, super good. We had a suggestion from our listeners. I don't actually know who runs the account, No Context Monster of the Week. I don't know who that person is. I think I know, but I don't want to dox them if they're not putting that out there. But the Twitter account, No Context Monster of the Week, suggested that we rename one of our sections Beat by Eat instead of Beat by Beat. So are you ready to go to our Beat by Eat section?
I am very ready to go to our Beat by Eat section.
I like how we're both very carefully enunciating that. That's very fun. Beat by eat.
Beat by eat. It's especially hard for me because it's not my mother tongue. Just
sure.
like beat by eat.
You speak English better than I do. So if you've ever been like sensitive about your ability to speak English, please do not be, because you speak English way better than I do. So.
Well, thank you. I'm technically bilingual, but like sometimes it's still hard, and I still hear my like little like tiny bit of French accent in there, and I'm just like, ah.
People love it. People love people with accents in general, I think. So, I mean, look at Lana Del Rey. She's dating a Cajun dude right now. So.
Yes, named Jeremy, apparently.
Yes, yeah, she's Jeremy Dufresne, which is the most Cajun name you could possibly have.
I love that.
Oh my god.
Or Quebecois, frankly, because I'm like that could be somebody from Quebec.
So, we're going to start out at the FBI Academy, where Will is doing what he normally does, is teaching his class about the serial killer, the Chesapeake Ripper. He explains that the Ripper is killing in sounders of 3, so 3 kills in the space of 9 days. And he explains that a sounder is a small group of pigs, which of course is the way that Will believes the Ripper sees his victims. We go through... I like this that they do this. Like, they put these pictures in the background. They don't focus on them too much. You just see it kind of behind Will. But we see pictures of the Ripper's kills, which we actually have not seen. We haven't experienced, except for the Wound Man kill, which is the one that we saw in the previous episode. And he's going through all of these. And it's just interesting to see, like, they've been collecting this information for a long time. And, like, just how long Hannibal has been able to do this, right?
Right.
And Jack walks into the room right as he's beginning to explain about the Chesapeake Ripper's last victim, which was Miriam Lass, and the arm that was found 2 years later after she disappeared. And he describes the Ripper as consistently theatrical, which is just so good.
I love it. So extra. Again, like the performance just in the word theatrical, which I love. So already with this like 20-second intro, I knew that this episode was going to be really good. Like, there's just so much to unpack in just those few sentences. So first off, the sounders, like I guess it makes sense that Hannibal would, or like that the Ripper would see his victims as pigs if he eats them, right? Like they're livestock to him, and I quote, not prey. And then the consistently theatrical part, like, listen, Queen Hannibal Lecter doesn't dress the way that he does to be called anything less than consistently theatrical. And like I said earlier, like this idea of like being theatrical also hints at the idea that there's a performance going on there, right? And in the case of Hannibal, like we're going to see him performing so many different things for different people throughout this episode, and we're going to see how much of a toll that takes on him too.
And our theme is underlined immediately in the next scene, where we have this incredible shot of the inside of an opera singer's throat, as the camera pulls out, and we see basically her esophagus, her throat, her tonsils, her mouth, everything. It's a really like intense, meaty shot. And as it pulls out, we see this incredibly beautiful woman singing an opera song. And I'm going to make some notes as we get to certain parts. So like this is... I don't know how to pronounce any of this stuff. You might have to help me out here.
Sure.
It's below the review section in our notes.
Okay. Hold on. Let me scroll down. I'm like, oh my God, I'm lost.
It's performed by Emily Clausen. I know how to pronounce that. That's okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. So the Piangero la sorte mia.
I'm so glad you did that and not me. And I just wanted to mention this. I think I don't know that it provides a lot of insight, but I really enjoyed spending time this morning, like going and figuring out like what these songs were and trying to figure out if there could be any connection. And this is sung from the perspective of Cleopatra, who thinks that she just lost her love, Caesar, and she's kind of mourning this. At the same time, she's losing her battle for Egypt. She partnered with Caesar to be able to capture Egypt, to be able to rule Egypt, and her brother Telemo has killed Caesar, as she thinks, and also taken over the city. So this like angry outburst that she has, and the singer is incredible in the actual Hannibal TV show, she just has this angry look on her face that is just incredible. Like it's just so like it makes you want to go watch all opera all the time.
I agree. I was like, what is this song? I want to know more about it.
Very, very good. And of course, this zooms into his, like, we see Hannibal in the crowd, and just a nice little note here, kind of a connection to the books, that he's sitting on an aisle seat. It's noted in the books for some reason he always sits on the aisle.
Ooh.
Yeah, just a nice little nod. And we see him, the camera zooms into his ear as he's listening to this, and as it comes out and we see his face, he's literally tearing up. He's having this emotional connection to this woman who has lost her love. Yeah. And again, this is obviously a performance, right? Because we're seeing an opera singer in this thing, but also like we talked about it being kind of fruity. So I just wanted to mention that, this is somebody who believes, he's listening to a song from someone who believes that she lost her love and her support.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like, yes, it's a performance, but there's this idea of like freedom through performance, right? Of when you watch the theater, when you watch movies, you also connect to these characters. You connect to the performance that you're seeing, and so Hannibal is doing just that, right? Like he has trouble connecting to people when they're being themselves, but all of a sudden, when there's a performance, he's more able to connect. And I'm not too sure what that means for him, but I just thought that was interesting.
That's so interesting, because that's the same way that Will is to a degree, right? He has problems connecting directly to people, and maybe that's something that that Hannibal sees in Will, like from the beginning, that they both have that problem connecting with people one-on-one, but they can connect to, like Will is obviously connecting to the performances of all of these serial killers. That's an incredible insight. I love that. In the crowd, we also see Franklin, who we haven't seen for several episodes. This is one of Hannibal's patients. Franklin cannot take his eyes off of Hannibal during this whole thing. Hannibal, of course, notices this and completely just disregards it. And as the singer finishes up the aria, Hannibal shoots up. He's the first one to stand up and applaud. And Franklin mimics him. And we see his companion, Tobias, kind of look at him like, "You nerd. What are you doing? Like you're being so incredibly awkward right now."
Oh my god. I just want to highlight before we move on to anything else that like this is a concert for hunger relief.
It's so good.
I thought was just so diabolical. I loved it. I was like, oh, of course it's for hunger relief. So that means that Hannibal is a patron of an organization for hunger relief.
It's so funny. It's so funny.
Oh my god.
The irony.
Diabolical.
Yeah.
Yes.
Outside, one of the attendees knows Hannibal socially, and she's begging him to host another dinner party. Have you seen him cook? It's a whole show, and basically demanding that he host another one. There's some lines here I didn't write down that I thought were kind of interesting, where he talks about, you can't just make up the feast. The feast has to come to you, and the feast is something that you eat to live, and things like that. I think Hannibal just likes talking about food at some point. Like, I'm like, okay, I get it, girl. Like, we get what you're going for.
Exactly. And also this, this is my Our Flag Means Death, like brain rot, but like this idea of dinner as pageantry, right? Again, very extra. Like I love him. I love him so much. And something that I thought was interesting too is like the attendee says that it's been a long time since he's cooked for her, right? And Hannibal says that he will once inspiration strikes. So we get the feeling that like maybe Hannibal's been bored lately, probably from having to cool down all of his killing activities after killing Miriam last 2 years ago, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And it's also this idea that like inspiration and art, so like he sees his cooking as an art form.
Right. As a creative endeavor, right?
Yeah.
And he'll say later that he like transferred his passion for anatomy into the culinary arts. Like this is literally a passion for him. And you're right. Like it's probably been a while because it's been 2 years since they found any known victims of the Chesapeake Ripper. So it's been 2 years since he's harvested a bunch of meat, right?
Well, it's also like it kind of got me wondering, like, has he like what's been happening in these 2 years? Like, has he just been cooling off, like not wanting to draw too much attention, or has he just been like kind of in a rut? Is my question, because then that could imply that like meeting Will like reignited his passion, right? Which, fruity. Love that.
Franklin and Tobias arrive. Franklin rather rudely inserts himself into the conversation to introduce Tobias. Hannibal tries to handle this, like, I think in a very kind of almost snobbish manner of being like, because the lady that he's talking to that's demanding the dinner party is like, how do you two know each other? And Hannibal's like, there should be some mystery. And Franklin can't just help but blurt out like, I'm one of his patients. Right. And Tobias points out that Franklin was more interested in Hannibal than he was interested in the performance. And Hannibal is like, that's cool. Good to meet you. See you later. Like, just kind of summarily dismisses the two of them in a very polite way.
Yes. That it was so awkward. I loved it. I love how awkward it was. I was like, oh no, he's killing. And okay, so there's going to be a conversation later about that. But when I saw this, I figured that Franklin and Tobias were a couple. That was my immediate assumption.
Sure.
So I'm just going to say that, right?
I think Franklin. I think you would be right in it. I think anybody watching this would assume that.
Right, exactly. Especially Tobias being like more interested in you than in the performance. Like
kind of a little jealous. Like that, exactly.
Yes, that's jealous boyfriend, and I get it, because Franklin was definitely. He wasn't acting right. Like, I wouldn't be happy if I was with him there, Well,
don't worry. We're going to learn a lot more about Franklin and Tobias's relationship. Even in the next episode, maybe. Hannibal ends this by saying, who's hungry to everybody, and causing just a bunch of laughter, which is very funny. Like, it's a good joke, I guess. Like, good job. And he just can't help himself, right? Like, I think that's the thing about this. He just can't help himself from doing this.
I feel like Hannibal is kind of like, okay, so he in the relationship that we have, like, he is the you, where like you can say things that are like, you can double speak to the listeners.
Yes.
So like you can tell me something that is going to go way over my head, but listeners are going to be like, I can't believe he just said that, because you know what's going to happen. And it sort of feels like this is what's happening here, where Hannibal is like, who's hungry? So to everybody it's like, oh, ha, 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 he's hungry because it's a hunger relief thing. Ha ha ha, bad joke. But then for us it's like chilling, because he's just saw these people and he's like, that was rude. Who's hungry? And we know he's a cannibal. So screaming.
Yeah. So anyway. He's probably already thinking about eating Franklin at some point.
Oh, exactly.
And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I just kind of love that, like you said, he can't help himself. Like, so regardless of the performance that he's putting on for others, like his true nature is always creeping back up.
He just lives his life like he's on a TV show. Like he's constantly put together, like doing all of these fancy things. Like he's got everything ready to go with no preparation. Like it's like watching Martha Stewart like cook a dinner, and she just like brings it out of the oven in 2 minutes. Right? She's like, okay, yes. An hour and a half later, the casserole is finished, or like it's just constant performing. We finally get our intro, and then we go over to Jack as he's entering the morgue at the FBI headquarters. He begins to hear a phone ring coming from one of the body drawers, and as he opens it, he finds Miriam Lass's arm holding the phone that is ringing, which is disturbing by itself. But of course, what ends up happening is Jack awakes because his actual phone in real life is beginning to ring. And I think, we talked a lot about unraveling last time, and I think this is just another example of that, of just him becoming a little unraveled at the Ripper is poking at him, right, as Will's about to say.
I know, like, and the fact that he's having nightmares, like that the Ripper is getting into his head the same way that he is getting into Will's. I mean, it has to be bad news for the FBI.
Right?
Like, just, that can't be good. I love Hannibal, but that can't be good for the FBI.
Can't possibly be good, yeah.
No, exactly.
It's a case. And so Jack picks Will up and says, that we found this guy. He's got his liver pulled out. There's some other damages. We think it could be a Ripper case, but don't worry, you're going to get the crime scene fresh. And Will says fresh as a daisy, like he's kind of remarking on this term fresh. And they discuss the Ripper, and Will says that Jack wants him wrapped around the Ripper so much that he won't go back to class, that he will just have the idea of the Ripper will consume him so much that he'll have to catch the Ripper before he can go back to his normal life. And he warns Jack, and I love the delivery on this line where he says, "Don't let the Ripper stir you up," and he specifically points out like the reason that the Ripper gave you Miriam's arm was specifically to poke at you, to make you, to trip you up, basically.
And Jack responds with something that I found to be really heartbreaking, because he goes, "Why not the rest of her?"
Yeah, it's a bummer.
And again, like for us, knowing that Hannibal is a cannibal, it's like, oh, Jack, oh, poor baby, let me hug you. Yeah. Like
it's probably one of like 3 worst outcomes that you could have for one of your mentees, right? in this kind of environment.
For sure.
Jack is convinced that this is the first of 3 Ripper victims, and they're going to. He sees this as his opportunity to catch the Ripper, which, of course, last time when this happened, he not only lost the Ripper, he lost Miriam. He doesn't intend to waste this opportunity. They get to the crime scene, where nobody has touched the body except for maybe Beverly and Z have.
I just love that Jack was like, "You're going to get the crime scene fresh." And then Beverly's like, "I touched the body and I may have touched it too." It's just like, oh my God. You guys really are children. Like,
they describe the surgery to remove the liver and the heart as performed and then unperformed. And I this was before we wrote notes. I was just watching this. It's really interesting that they use that word as we are creating performance as a theme throughout this episode.
Yeah, and I think that's also really cool, right? This idea of surgery as a performance, because we do think about surgery, like he performed surgery or she performed surgery. So,
well, if you think about,
I love it when the theme shows up like that.
And if you think
verbally.
about like, in the medical profession, like you were sometimes performing surgery for an audience of people who are watching how you do it, right?
Of course,
which is fascinating too. This guy's kidney is missing, and the killer went for his heart, but the heart is still there. So it's time for Will to go into hunter vision mode when the pendulum comes out.
Hunter vision mode. I love it.
He begins in the main part of the house. He sees the moose walk through.
Jared,
we called this the stag for so long, and then you make one moose joke, and now it's the moose for life.
And now it's Sam Winchester. What is Sam Winchester doing here?
Why is 6'9" Sam Winchester walking through the set of Hannibal right now?
With his very, very big jeans.
Man, I bet there's some supernatural / Hannibal fiction out there, huh? Like the boys are hunting Hannibal.
Oh, there has
to be, right?
There has to be.
God, Hannibal would despise Dean Winchester. He would just absolutely, or he would just so completely break Dean Winchester, right? That would also be super fun. Anyway, let's not talk. I'm going down a. Maybe revealing too much about myself.
Like, just saying. Like, yes, absolutely. He would be really, I think he would find him really rude, but also, like, there would be a little, like, interest, right? Like, he'd be like, what are you?
Demons are often the collection of evils in our minds. Tell me, Dean, what evil do you have in your mind?
Yes.
What evil are you hunting? We should write this. If it's not already written, we should collaborate and write this.
Oh my God. Okay, all right. Making a note.
I'll find a comic artist, and we will make a comic book out of this. This would be brilliant.
Yes.
I just want Tell Me Dean.
Tell Me Dean.
That's the funniest thing.
And then you just see Sam Winchester with antlers walking through the room.
Just in the background, like nobody notices. He's just like. We're gonna get into this. So Will narrates this as he usually does. He says that the victim woke suddenly from a deep sedation and they begin to fight. Will throws this dude in the bathroom, and that's when he realizes this man's heart is seizing up. So Will digs into this man's chest with a scalpel, spreads his ribs, and is holding his heart in his hand. And then this is, throughout all of this, like the music is really intense, and we see this like thumping heartbeat throughout, and it's going faster and faster. As Will shoves his hands in this man's chest and holds his heart, he realizes that the killer was massaging this heart to save this man. And as he realizes that, like, the heartbeat in the soundtrack slows down to a more normal rate, so he's literally saving this man's life. He comes back to our world and calls for Jack, and is like, it tells him what he saw, and says, "Would the Ripper do that?" Probably not, right? For what we know about the Ripper, probably would not do this.
No, certainly not.
There's a brief commercial break, and then the scene is Jack and Will in the bathroom, and Z is standing in the doorway, basically insisting that it's got to be the Ripper. Like, he says there's 22 signature components, and Will disagrees and just kind of casually walks over and just closes the door in the man's face, which is just really funny.
And honestly, like, I can't remember which one came out first, if it was Sherlock or if it was this, but like, this is a scene that is directly pulled, or like, you know, it's a Sherlock moment, literally, where Sherlock Holmes in the BBC Sherlock, like, closes the door on one of the ERTs called Anderson, and he's like, "Yes, Anderson," and just closes the door because Anderson is just being annoying and rude and wrong, and those are things that Sherlock absolutely hates.
There's actually a note in, I thought it was the wiki, like the fandom wiki page that I saw, that mentioned that, and I had never. I don't remember.
Oh yeah.
I didn't watch the last season of Sherlock, but I watched the first 2 seasons, and I didn't remember that at all. But it must have been on the IMDb page. Someone mentions it very specifically, of like, "Oh, this is definitely a call to Sherlock." Like, and it's very
how
funny.
It felt.
Yeah,
it's in the first episode, the very first episode. I think, like the pink, the study in pink, actually.
Yep,
and
you got
it's
it.
like it's so good. It's so good. I loved the first few seasons of Sherlock, and this was. Like, this again tickled my heart this time, right? Massaged my cold dead heart.
The IMDb trivia page notes that great detective minds both misbehaving impolitely alike, which is a good sentence, which is fun. Jack insists at this point, Will says, I think this is just a kid or a doctor student just trying to make money on a black market kind of thing. The Ripper, you know, he's this guy who left the man in church with his tongue ripped out and used as a bookmark in the Bible that he was reading, which is a reference to one of the Hannibal kills in the books, which is kind of cool.
Cool.
And Jack says, "We'll catch the River," Will says, "We'll catch the Ripper," and Jack says, I want to catch him now," and it's kind of spooky.
Yeah, it is spooky because he openly says that, like, he's basically going to kill him when he catches him. Like, I think he says something like, "You're not going to be able to shoot him because I will do that first," right? And like, listen, this is why I feel that Jack should have been pulled from this case, because it's clearly too personal for him. But it does make for great TV because, like, of course I don't want him shooting my little meow meow, right? Like, please don't shoot him. I love him.
Will... God damn it! I'm going to keep doing it. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is.
It's fine.
It's like, if I do it once, the whole episode is cursed. But if I don't manage first, if I can get over the hump, then I'm good for the whole episode. It's so weird. Jack asks Will how he sees the Ripper, and Will says he sees the Ripper as one of these pitiful things born in a hospital that they don't even put on machines. They just let it die. Except he doesn't die. He just looks normal. And this is all dialogue ripped directly from Thomas Harris from the books. This is exactly the thing. Yeah. It's like line for line, which I thought was cool.
Oh my God. And I think one thing that I really, really loved is when he says, "Nobody can tell what he is."
So good, because of the performance that he's putting on, right? Like, nobody sees the real him. And of course, as the classic Hannibal move, we're going to cut directly to Hannibal after this.
I love this. I love this so much. Again, like, I find that the editing of this is just so brilliant. The writing, everything is great, right? So this is, like, what Will just said to Jack is basically what Miriam Lass had also told Jack before, right? It was much less poetic when she said it, but she did say that, you know, he had no remorse, but he isn't a drifter and he doesn't have a history of trouble with the law. So I'm sort of, like, back to thinking about how I think that Jack picked Will Graham to work on this case specifically because he was so different from Miriam, but then he's now hearing him come to the same conclusions that she did 2 years ago. like that must be really hard on him, and we're going to see that he kind of like mixes them up in his mind at some point soon in this episode.
And we, Alana is going to talk about this in a little while too. Just like Jack's lenience and reliance upon Will, to Will's detriment. And also, obviously, to Miriam's detriment. Like, hopefully, Will doesn't get his arm cut off, right? Like, that would be horrible.
Hopefully
not. In Hannibal's office, it's time for Franklin's appointment. You can tell he's excited to talk about Hannibal as he sits on the edge of his seat and tells Hannibal, like, "Oh, I kind of thought you would be at this performance, and I tried to get your attention, and it didn't work. But I could tell that you knew I was trying." And Hannibal is. You could tell he's almost disgusted by Franklin throughout this entire conversation. It's got to be pretty miserable for Franklin, to be honest with you. And he tries to say like, "Hey, it would be unethical for us to acknowledge one another in our relationship outside of this room, and because you're a patient."
It's especially unethical for Hannibal to point him out as a patient, right? Like the patients can say like, because it belongs to them, right? Like they're not bound by confidentiality about their own life, but like therapists, psychiatrists, doctors are bound by confidentiality. Like a doctor cannot point out, "This is my patient," but a patient can say, "This is my doctor."
Yeah, I made my therapist moved on, so I have to find a new therapist. And as she was telling me this, I made a joke at the end. It's like, "Oh, well, we can be Facebook friends now." And she was like, "No, the ethics." I was like, "Oh, okay." And because we live in a cursed...
That's a good therapist.
Yeah. But because we live in a cursed world, I open up like Facebook, and in my suggested friends, her profile picture shows up for the first time, and like has never showed up before in like the year that I've been going to her. And I was like, "This is just weird, Facebook. I don't need you listening to these conversations."
Oh my god, I hate this so much. Facebook listens to you.
I know it's just not fun. Franklin desperately wants to be friends with Hannibal. And he even says, like, "It makes me sad that I have to pay to see you." And Hannibal is just growing more and more frustrated through this conversations. And yeah, like you just, Franklin, like just, Franklin.
I know. I mean, this gave me major secondhand embarrassment. Like the Office level of secondhand embarrassment. Like I just... Again, Franklin, like you need better boundaries, like, because even if Hannibal wasn't a cannibal, like this is just so awkward, so awkward. Like you can tell that Hannibal is not having it. Like, let it go. Just say you're sorry and move on. Like, find a different therapist.
And it's different than the way that he was with Bella. Right, which is really the only time we've seen him in therapy mode besides Franklin.
Yeah.
And with Bella, he's very patient. He has insight, and he obviously like is trying to manipulate her so he can get closer to Jack, so he can eventually eat everybody in the FBI. But here you could tell he's just like dismissive almost, and it's just really. It's like you said, it's very awkward. It gets even worse when Franklin describes crying, listening to Michael Jackson and beginning to cry. Not because he's dead, but because now that he's dead, Franklin won't be there, can't be his friend. And if he was Michael Jackson's friend, he says, I would be able to save him. I'd be able to save him from what he did to himself. And Hannibal says, like, he asks a question like, what would your part of this friendship be? Like, what would you gain from this friendship? And Franklin says, I would just get to touch greatness, which is what he sees in Hannibal that he's reaching out to, even though he's responding to maybe the worst kind of greatness that has ever been. So
I mean, so Hannibal, first off, is just so unimpressed when Franklin says, I'm sorry, I just think this is so funny. Like, because Franklin says that he's feeling like crying over Michael Jackson, and like, we saw him tearing up over like an opera piece by Handel, and Franklin is talking about pop music, and like you can just tell that Hannibal is just so insulted that Franklin says that like they love the same things and would make great friends. Like, dare I say he finds him rude?
Of course.
Dare
maybe,
I say that?
Maybe.
But there's like another thing that I was really fascinated with in this moment, especially on my first watch, and it's how like Franklin basically says that if he had been friends with Michael Jackson, like he could have helped save him from himself. And I sent you a DM about this, and you didn't like it, but I said that you and I are kind of like Franklin.
I don't
because
like that.
we both think we both think that the same thing about Hannibal. Really, like I can fix him. No, really, I
can
can't.
fix him. I can fix him. No, just take it. I can do it.
But Daddy, I love him. Like,
Have you seen American Psycho?
I haven't.
Okay. I'm not one of those dudes that holds up American Psycho as like one of his favorite movies or something, but there's a famous speech in that where as the main character is about to kill some people, he talks about Huey Lewis and the News. He goes into this like really in-depth musical analysis of why it's one of the most important albums of the decade, and at the same time he's like covered in plastic and axe murdering people, right? Like it's kind of a fascinating
Excellent
scene.
Excellent.
Yes, I agree. And I was watching this and listening to Franklin talk about Michael Jackson, I was reminded of that scene. I was wondering how Hannibal would feel about him talking to him, because like you're right that he's insulted because Franklin is comparing like pop music to this opera. But I think like if Franklin could speak about Michael Jackson's music, he could sell it to Hannibal as being powerful, but it's not about the music, right? It's completely about something different. It's about this relationship that he's invented in his head. And that's fascinating to me. So,
but that's the thing. I think Hannibal also, like in his performance of a human being, right? Of a quote unquote normal human being, also like tends to gravitate towards like very highbrow stuff. Whereas like we tend to think about pop music as lower brow than like than opera. And I kind of wonder how much of that is because he's trying to be somebody, to present the face of somebody that he's not really.
Yes.
And so I wonder how he would react if somebody were to explain it like on an emotional level, like what it means to like Michael Jackson's music.
I bet
like,
Will has some garbage opinions about music, man. Like he's probably like, no, Hannibal, like seriously, like Arms Wide Open is one of the anthems of the 2000s, and we need to listen to it together. Like he's 6 feet from the edge, Hannibal. He's 6 feet. He doesn't know. Listen to me, man. It's powerful, and Hannibal is just like, my God, why do I love this man?
Hannibal makes allowances for Will. Like we'll see that later, but he makes allowances for Will that he doesn't make for other people.
Oh yeah, and we've already seen that, right? With when Hannibal smelled him and was like, "What is this aftershave that you're using?" Like it turned him off, but like he still allowed it, right? It wasn't off-putting to him, or maybe it was off-putting, but like he still accepted it. I guess we should say.
I think this is him thinking like I can fix him. No, really, I can. He's like I can give him a better aftershave.
The soundtrack to the show.
Yes.
We're gonna cut from here to our girl, Gillian Anderson. Yes! She is playing the character of. She's not named in this episode, but Bedelia du Maurier. Maurier. Am I saying that right?
Du Maurier.
There you go. And before we even get into this character or Gillian's performance or anything that happens, I want to just mention real quick that they originally meant to cast Angela Lansbury in this role. I can't imagine.
What a different vibe.
What a huge different vibe. And for those of you out there that know everything that is going to happen with Bedelia during the events of Hannibal, I just want you to picture Angela Lansbury in those roles and just get the biggest fucking laugh like I did, because I love Angela Lansbury. I think she's probably one of the... Has she died? Is she dead? I don't even know if she's alive anymore.
I don't know. I don't know. I think of her as permanently alive. Like,
sure.
You know?
Oh, no. She passed 2 years ago, October 22. But she's probably one of the greatest actors of our generation. But some of the stuff that happens on the show would be really weird to see. Grandma murder writer doing some of this stuff.
So for transparency, I knew that Gillian was going to be on this show, and I know I had heard like her character name before, and I also know that she might not be a great person. But again, like I feel like that's kind of like what the show is. Like there are no great people on this show, so like, but I do like that's what I know, just so that people are aware of like what I know.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say like there's definitely protagonists, but there's no heroes on this show, right? Which I think is super interesting. There's maybe one or two, and we will talk about them as we get to them. But
anyway, she is so beautiful.
Oh my god, heartbreakingly
she's such
gorgeous.
a vision.
I mean, just like
yes,
yeah. I'd like. Have you ever seen? This is such a weird pull. Have you ever seen the Reddit post where it's like, if you could go back in time, what would you do? Like, what would you go back and what would you want to change? And like one of the first posts, and like it's so highly upvoted, is this man who talks about, I lost my wife to cancer. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. I would go back and just spend more time with her. I miss her every single day. And the first post in response is, I also choose that guy's dead wife. And she is so heartbreakingly beautiful. And the reason I'm thinking about that is like, this is the ultimate like dead ex-wife. She just looks that heartbreakingly beautiful. Like in every action movie where the main star gets motivated by his dead ex-wife, it's this image, this beautiful woman that has this heartbreaking face. So anyway, I'm sorry. That was a long rant to talk about how beautiful Gillian Anderson is.
I mean, she is. Like she opens the door and it's like, like my heart skipped a beat.
Yeah. She has that effect on people.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And especially like in this part where she's like so confident and just so like, okay.
Another thing I want to mention is that this is a wholly created character for the show. This has not ever been anything in the books or the previous movies, which is fantastic because this is Hannibal's psychiatrist. And they sit down and they begin to have a conversation. And much like any conversation in Hannibal where there's therapy happening, it's almost impossible to keep up with all of the incredible writing. She says that these sessions generally go better when she's perfectly honest. And Hannibal says, well, I'm being honest. And she goes, not perfectly, which is I just love the verbal sparring and all of this. She describes talking to a version of Hannibal. And she hopes that what she says gets behind that and because he's wearing a well-tailored person suit. And again, this gets back to our theme of performance. Like I mentioned earlier, this is him pretending to be a normal human person and going to psychiatry. But she recognizes the fact that this is all fake, but she's still trying to talk to whatever or whoever it is behind that suit.
Yeah, she said something about like how she hopes that the real you gets what he needs, kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's making me think that like she's basically that we see, right, as the audience, she's basically the first person to see Hannibal's performance, even though at this point it seems like she doesn't necessarily see through it. Like she can't quite tell what's behind it, or maybe she does and we just don't, or I just don't know it yet. But at this point in time, it feels like she may not quite know what is behind this well-tailored person suit, which, oh my God, what a great
what a great line. Just an amazing phrase, because my person suit is not very well tailored. My person suit is very ill-fitting. So it's baggy in places I don't want it to be baggy. It's weak in places I don't want it to be weak. It's, you know what I'm saying? It's
well, again, it's this idea of like well-tailored,
yes.
right? Like, so it's very Hannibal, right? Who makes sure that all of the details are perfect. There's like, he has this, this obsession about control, but also about perfection. And of course, his persona, right, to move away from the person suit, but like his persona is well tailored. So much so that like, she's like, that's not, people aren't like that. Like normal people aren't like that. So you are wearing a well tailored person suit, but there's something else underneath that.
We learned that, because he asked her something about, do you describe me as a well-tailored person suit to your psychiatrist friends? And she says, I don't talk about any of my patients with my psychiatrist friends. In fact, I don't have any patients other than you, because you're the only one that insisted I couldn't retire. And I find that's a really fascinating insight into this relationship that we are just now learning about for the first time, because it kind of, we're going to talk here in just a minute where he's kind of wanting to be friends with her. And this line is so strange to me because it almost like tips the power balance in his favor. Because like, why would she agree to be his therapist if she's retired? Like, what is it that's drawing her back to him? What is it that he's making her? Why is he making her do this? Why her? And it's just kind of interesting to me, especially because she asks him, she says, maybe this is not a person suit. Maybe this is a human veil, which is also just a remarkable phrase. And they start talking about friends, and he says, we're friends, or, we're at least friendly. And Bedelia's like, we're absolutely not friends, homie. We don't, she goes, when we finish this, I'll pour you a glass of wine, but you'll be drinking it on the other side of the veil. And again, just go back to that line of like, you're my only patient. You wouldn't let me retire. Like, why? What has happened? What is this relationship?
Right. No, I agree with you. Like, I was like, oh, well, so it's interesting because the way that I understood that was that like, she still has to have some sort of like, she still has to consent to see him, right? Like she could just not open the door.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so I think she's really like, again, this is just like first impressions, but I think she's really intrigued by this man, right? And so that's why she kind of keeps him on as a patient. But I think also like they are each other's like intellectual equals. And I think that probably both of them have trouble finding that like in their lives. And so there's like this bond that's been created between these two people, because like you cannot tell me that Bedelia is also not like wearing a very well-tailored person suit. Like there's something about this woman.
Well, and some of it is the trappings that we see her in too. This extremely very clean, organized, respectfully tasteful kind of furnishings that she has in the room. It seems very expensive, and she's wearing a nice tailored dress, and she has perfectly coiffed hair. She offers him a glass of wine. So you get the like, even if we don't know that they're intellectual equals, we kind of feel that they're operating on the same plane.
Yes.
And I think the implication is that they are intellectual equals, because otherwise why would Hannibal be here, right? Like there's no, he would never subject himself to somebody poking around in his head like Dr. Gideon described Alana doing in the previous episode. This relationship is fascinating, and I can't wait to talk about it more.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it too, to be honest with you. And like, when I first watched it, it was really, really surprising to me, because like we had just seen Hannibal like being so upset and having so much contempt for Franklin, wanting to be his friend. And yet he's basically put in a similar position now, right? Like he's seeing a lot more into this relationship with his psychiatrist than there really is, or even than there should be, right? And the psychiatrist having to kind of like put him back, like reframe him and be like, no, you're my patient. I'm your therapist. Yes. Like there's no friendship there. So it was like, oh, okay. So like you also are seeking ways of like just touching greatness, just like Franklin, right? So it's tickling my brain.
It's so good.
And I'm also thinking about like Bedelia's line that she's basically because she's basically saying like, even if you weren't my patient, you wouldn't be my friend because you constantly have to hide who you are, right? Like when she says like you would be drinking it on the other side of the veil. And I kind of love that. Again, like it makes me think that like she knows a lot more about who he is than he lets on, and that's why he's like, oh, she knows me, and she knows me, and she still like accepts me, I guess. Like she loves me, maybe, despite of who I am. I don't know. This is a weird relationship, but I kind of love it. I love it so much.
It's good. And the good news is we will get to explore this relationship to all of its nooks and crannies in time.
I'm so scared.
Just the evil laugh. Insert evil laugh. Will arrives to find Hannibal drinking. This is kind of an awkward transition because this episode was originally supposed to be like the 4th episode in the series. But
Really?
Brian Fuller was like, maybe we should develop Hannibal more before we show him killing 3 people to make a fantastic feast. Like maybe we should build him up a little bit. So they reshot this a little bit. And this is one of the kind of fallouts from this is because we go from seeing him drink a pink wine at Bedelia's house to him drinking pink wine at his office when Will comes in. Just a little weird. So
I kind of loved that actually because it did feel a bit choppy, but I loved it because it's like he saw this glass of wine as being like maybe a step toward friendship and closeness with Bedelia, and so he's trying to recreate that with Will. And I kind of love that. I love that he is like so desperately trying to be friends with Will.
And this is going to come up because Hannibal describes his relationship with his psychiatrist as unconventional, and Will says we have that in common. And Hannibal specifically told Jack when Jack asked that he was not Will's therapist, that they just have conversations, right? So again, like Hannibal is very, very wants to be very, very clear about these lines and their relationships and how exactly that's defined, which is fascinating to me. Like that's just the way that Hannibal works, I guess.
And it's also like because this is when Hannibal asks Will if he's really his patient or if they're simply having conversations, and Will replies, "Yes, I think is the answer to that." And I'm just like, oh, poor Hannibal again being like reframed about the nature of his relationship with somebody, right? Like he doesn't want Will to be his patient. He wants him to be his boyfriend. Like it's so clear.
I love this so much because Will says yes to both of those so that they're just talking. Hannibal decides to offer him a glass of wine, saying it wouldn't be inappropriate given that it's a late appointment and they're just, friends. And he tells Will that he's been seeing a psychiatrist since he decided to become a psychiatrist himself, which I think is another like just so extra. Like I love him. It's so good. Just the idea of the amount of work you have to do to become a psychiatrist, like the years of study and like classes that you have to take. Like it's not like he just decided to become a psychiatrist, right? Like I can decide to go fishing tomorrow. I can't decide to go be a psychiatrist tomorrow. Like I can't. But just the idea that he was like, nope, I'm going to be a psychiatrist. That means I have to have my own. And then he changes the subject.
But again, it's this idea of like, oh, if I want to do this, then I must do that because that is the accepted thing. Like it's the desire to fit in this society, right? Which is also something that I think a lot of neurodivergent people can relate to, which is interesting because Will has never really tried. We haven't really seen Will trying to fit in. He actually kind of rejects that idea. And I wonder if maybe Hannibal doesn't think that that's really fascinating to him.
They drink wine. Will looks so awkward with a glass of wine in his hand. He's so comfortable in his like flannel clothing and his like kind of dressed downness compared to like the accoutrement that Hannibal has in his office and his like super put together suit. That Will just holding a wine glass and that just looks awkward to me. It's very funny. Hannibal changes the subject to the latest Ripper case, which he read on Freddie Lounge's blog, and begins to ask Will, what is this a Ripper victim or not, right? Like, is this something that do you think Jack is going to be finding out about, all this other kind of stuff?
Listen, Hannibal is just such a chaos gremlin. He's trying to convince Will that maybe the Ripper was never the same guy, right? And Will just completely dismisses this idea for no other reason than he thinks that it's completely absurd to think that the Ripper could have a friend. And again, like, ouch! Like, Hannibal is just getting like, oh my God. Like, nobody likes him. He just wants a friend.
So horrible. It's so horrible, Will. Why are you so mean to our boy?
I know.
They talk about the kill, and they talk about the Ripper's killing, and Will describes it as, everybody was been brutalized. Hannibal prompts, what was the brutalization hiding? And Will is kind of taken aback by the idea that, there were organs missing. Like, could this be organ harvesters? Could this be like a group of people that we thought was the Ripper? And we go from here to a past shot, which we know because it's in faded black and white. And Hannibal, for insurance purposes, is getting like his blood drawn. And the man is relatively rude because he's demands to know if Hannibal has any infections and kind of condescendingly explains the differences between infections and diseases. And we see Hannibal request his business card, and which shouldn't be ominous. It's something that I do constantly. Like, this is a thing that happens in my life almost every single day. Why is this so ominous? And we know because we cut from here to Hannibal, or this same man, the same doctor, pulling over on the side of the road because his gas tank is leaking, and Hannibal pulls up directly behind him, and this like slow walk directly to him is so intimidating and so scary, and because we know what's going to happen, and it's terrifying, and like the music cranks up. We get this like good solid. I really enjoy Hannibal's original music soundtrack, like the clanging and everything. I think it's really good. so a lot of people do not like it. Like, a lot of people are like, there's a bunch of memes of like Hannibal looks at Will, a glass breaks, and somebody drops a piano. But I actually really enjoy it when the music like steps up and gets real weird like this.
Yeah, I agree.
And we go immediately from this to the man in the morgue at the FBI. He's literally been sawed in half, and Zeller is there saying that the man's kidney and heart were removed, and saying, well, that's what the Ripper was looking for in the first victim we found. And interspersed throughout all of this as we're talking is Hannibal just preparing meat, like, wrapping up the heart and like pulling the liver and like stuffing the liver with something or whatever. It looks so delicious. It looks so good. I want to have all of this. It just looks so tasty.
I'm not even an organ person. Like, I don't love eating organs. Like, I try to avoid them as much as possible, but I would definitely try some of those dishes, Like, why do I want to eat this?
That's the problem. I had this conversation on a podcast a long time ago with my buddy Gary. Like, I think one of the horrifying things about being friends with Hannibal is like eventually you realize like he fed you human meat, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, I ate human meat. That's really disgusting and horrible. I don't think I would feel that bad about it, though. I feel like I'd be like, I mean, it sucks, like, but I didn't kill anybody. Like, it's not my fault.
I think what would be really horrifying for me is like, oh shit, I liked it,
Right? Yeah. That would be like I'd have to like
really horrifying.
Reevaluate some things in myself. But I think like I'm a strong enough personality that like I absolutely love tiramisu. I don't eat tiramisu every single day of my life. You know what I'm saying? Like I could probably resist eating human meat after I learned it was human meat. I don't think I, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think I would like crave it.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, like, so I'd just be like, oh, just cook it rare next time or something. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying.
God. Also, there's also something about like, this podcast is going places, unexpected places, to be honest. But there's also something about like how he only seems to be harvesting the organs. Like, for some reason, I feel like the. Can't believe I'm about to say this out loud in front of a hot mic, but like there's so much meat in a human being and you choose to get only the organs. Like, it seems weird to me, but anyway,
I think
let's move on from that.
Let's remember that for the conversation that Will and Hannibal have a little bit later in this episode, because I think it applies. But Zeller keeps talking about this victim that's been cut in half, and that how they found him on a school bus, literally looking across the aisle from himself. And I found this so hilarious because, like, the guy was condescendingly explaining to PhD/psychiatrist Hannibal what the difference between infection and diseases are, and Hannibal literally sent this dude back to school on a bus cut in half. Like, it's so good.
Listen, I didn't even think about that, and then I read your notes, and honestly, I think like I was taking my notes last night, and I just like no, like I didn't think about it. It's so freaking brilliant. It's so good. Plus, like, Hannibal is also like a surgeon. Of course, he knows the difference between a disease and an infection.
Of course,
just like, this is so good. He's so extra.
So extra. Will still believes this is two killers, that it was the Ripper did this one, but not the first one. Zeller is still unbelieving. He's still the kind of the argument. And Will kind of presents this idea of organ harvesters. They talk about organs and like USB cables, which must drive a bunch of medical people watching the show crazy. Like I can't imagine.
Basically.
But they posit the other guy, whose name I still don't know, on the team, kind of says like maybe it could be two different people. One's an organ harvester pretending to be a serial killer, and one's a serial killer that harvests organs. And then there's a line in here. Zeller says at some point that he to Will like that's how the Ripper rips, which is very funny because it's a running joke between me and Autumn. One Christmas one year, they have a Jack the Ripper board game.
Okay.
And so like I had heard that it was fun to play or whatever, and we're not typically like a board game family, but we had a friend over and Autumn's dad was there, and this was before he had a stroke, so like we could all play board games together, and in typical board game fashion, like it took forever to figure out the rules and do all this stuff, and like the goal of the game is to track down the Ripper, Jack the Ripper, and like we're going through all this thing, and Autumn's dad at one point, like we have the Ripper quartered, and he just like out of nowhere is like, that's the house that the Ripper does his ripping. And like it just cracked us up. It's become like a running joke with us. So to hear it in this show was very, very funny.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. And this is also where like Will says that the Ripper wants to perform, right? That like every brutal choice has elegance, grace, and that his mutilations hide the true nature of his crimes. And if that's not exactly what Bedelia said earlier in this episode, then I don't know what she said.
And of course, we get the great cut to Hannibal right after this. Just immediately cut to Hannibal.
Oh my God.
And this time he and Alana Bloom are in the kitchen preparing a meal. He's creating something called tomato brains, which is invented by the chef that like invented a lot of the dishes on this show, where you basically like peel tomatoes and like make them into this like different kind of dish in an effort to like find the extraordinary in ordinary objects, quote unquote, which I thought was just kind of interesting. This is just a flirty little like date night, I guess. I don't know what this is. This is so flirty. Hannibal has made...
I think you described it perfectly. Like, it's a flirty little date night.
Hannibal has made a specific beer for Alana because she prefers beer over wine. He's aged beer in a wine barrel and bottled it himself. It's her own private reserve at his house, which is the most extra thing that you could possibly do. Like, I don't know how many quote unquote flirty little dates they've been on. Like, we saw them drinking together, talking about Abigail a few episodes ago. But if this, like, assume this is the first or second date, and I'm like, got you a whole store of alcohol at my house, girl. Like, it's a little extra.
That's a lot of effort. Like, that's a lot of effort.
It's so much.
It makes me wonder about the nature of the relationship between Hannibal and Alana, and I think we get like a little bit more about that just later in the scene. But like, I was like, is he interested in her that way? Like, it kind of sounds like it, right?
Yeah, because as they continue to talk, he asks, are you avoiding on purpose the subject of Will Graham? And she's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't want to know. She even says, I don't want to know anything about Will outside of our friendship, right? Like, I don't want to know anything about him that I couldn't learn just being his friend. And she talks about working on the Ripper case around the time Miriam disappeared. And I didn't quite get this. She said, at the time I was interviewing PhD candidates, and it's kind of implied she was doing it for him. But or maybe they're working in like the same facility or something. I don't know. And Hannibal just looks at her in his flirty little way, is like, those candidates thought we were having an affair. Why didn't we? And I'm like, Hannibal, stop.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like, so basically, if I understand correctly, like Hannibal sort of like manipulated the situation so that Alana would be away from Miriam when she was doing the digging into the Ripper. Right, because he wanted to keep Alana.
Yeah.
That's what I got from this conversation. I might be wrong again, just because I don't know the whole thing. But like, it sort of seemed like he wanted to keep Alana alive, and didn't want her to be too mixed up in this whole Ripper thing. Yeah, and so it's like, why didn't we have an affair? Like, what an interesting question to ask someone.
It's so flirty. It's maybe the flirtiest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, they thought we were having an affair. Why didn't we? Like, stop it. Get out of there.
Like, tell me, Alana, why didn't we have an affair?
This just went to rated X. How did that happen? What are we doing?
Right, but so again, it's like, so what? I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't love them together, but I clearly it's in the text, right? Like, there's something that like they're kind of dancing around. I think him a lot more than her, but it's, yeah, anyway.
She says that he and Will have that in common, and he says having affairs, which is, again, very flirty. She says no, flirtatiously changing the subject, and anytime something gets maybe a little uncomfortable, and he says, or maybe we just have you in common. Stop it, Hannibal, stop it. I don't know what you're doing right now. Please stop.
I mean, I know what he's doing right now. I have it in my notes. I'm like, throuple.
And this conversation ends with Alana just saying, like, she compares what Jack is doing to Will, the same thing that Jack did to Miriam, like just being so focused on catching the Ripper that he doesn't care about their well-being, and how she just wants everybody to leave Will alone to let him kind of live his life. I'm curious what you think overall. Like, obviously you've kind of given your thoughts a little bit, but just like in summation, about a potential relationship between Hannibal and Alana, because obviously we're like Hannibal and Will, like we're on this side, but this is so flirty, and so it doesn't feel out of character for Hannibal, but it feels like almost out of perspective. Like, we just don't expect this from him, and I'm curious how you feel about this on the first watch.
So okay. This is a good question because I haven't really reflected on it, so it's a good opportunity to do that. I sort of feel like there's like a love triangle that's happening between the three of them, where Alana is a lot more interested in Will than in Hannibal. Hannibal is a lot more interested in Will than in Alana. Will is just like clueless, right? Because he's Will Graham. But I think that Hannibal is trying to get close to Alana in order to get close to Will as well, right? And so when it comes to Hannibal and Alana, I think she is kind of just like enjoying what's happening just for what it is, which, you know, as we know, like, they're not having an affair, but there's like flirtatious this and that, and she's kind of like, oh well, whatever, like, this is fun, why stop it, even though I don't think she's as interested in Hannibal as she is in Will. Where was I going with this?
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think that all lines up. Is like, you know, because it's probably very fun to be flirty with Hannibal, but it's also probably pretty intimidating, right? I could see, like, I want to be in his kitchen hanging out and drinking his beer wine and making delicious food, but like, I don't necessarily want to take him home to mom and dad. Like, that's a little intimidating.
Yeah, there you go. I think there's that, and I think that Hannibal, like, is also, you know, Alana is pretty cool. She's able to tell that, like, she's tasting oak in the beer that he made her, right? Like, and I think that he's like, okay, well, you know, she's not Will Graham, but she'll do, right? Like, she's okay. She's fine. She's okay. She's all right. She's not Bedelia. She's not like Will Graham, but like, she's cool, right? Like, she comes to my dinner parties and eats my food. And tells me that I make good beer.
I'd be remiss, you know, as a X-Men podcaster to not talk about how well this lines up with Cyclops, Jean, and Wolverine.
Yes!
Especially
so good.
And I don't know, we may have talked about this at one time, but like, in the most recent comics, like, there's one of those diagrams of the X-Mansion, and it was revealed just recently, apparently, like, there's a door between Cyclops and Jean's and Wolverine's room now. Like, it's a connecting room. And I just, yep, that's Hannibal, Will, and Alana. Anyway.
That's how I see it personally. Like, to me, that's what this relationship is. Like, yeah.
So, as they talk about Jack, we switch to Jack. He's back to walking alone in the morgue, which seems like a real depressing way to get your steps in, but I'm not Jack Crawford, so I have no judgment. He doesn't. This time there's no phone ringing, but he decides to go over and check the drawer anyway. And as he opens it up, it's empty. But behind him on a morgue table, we see Will Graham, the corpse of Will Graham, sit up and look at him. And we see his arm missing, just like Miriam Lass's. And we see like the incision, the Y incision from his autopsy. And as Will disappears, like Jack kind of comes to, but he's already awake. Like the last time we saw this was a nightmare. Now he's literally having this happen to him while he's awake and walking around.
I mean, listen, Jack is having a real hard time, right? Like between his wife and this, and Miriam Lass coming back literally from the dead, and him worrying about Will and like seeing the similarities between Miriam and Will, and I think also realizing the error of his ways in so many ways. Like he's basically at the point where he's like kind of, in the last episode where he was like, I know when I'm awake. Like, yep. He doesn't know when he's awake anymore. And, unraveling, I think, is what's going on here. Like, and is that what Hannibal does to people? Because, like, now we have Will, to who this is happening. Now we have Jack. Like, who's next? Alana? Like, well, I don't know.
And don't forget about our girl, Abigail. Right? Like, that's
Abigail.
She's briefly in this episode in a little while, but like this is exactly kind of the thing that he was doing to Abigail, which is making her like hallucinate while she was awake. So
I try to not think too much about Abigail, but yes, that's right. That's
a good instinct. It's a good instinct. Yeah. It'll serve you well for this podcast and for this show, I think. Okay. We get to what's probably the highlight of this episode, and maybe just in terms of like fun, maybe the highlight of this season for me. It's difficult for me to remember exactly everything that happens in this season, so I might change my mind.
Sure.
But like this is such just a delightfully like debaucherous montage where we see Hannibal pulling a business card, pulling out of his recipe book a recipe card, and then going out and like killing somebody basically, and then bringing home the meat. And this is set to a I might need your help again. Le Vaudor.
Which one is it?
From Faust. It's the meat gathering montage.
Le Vaudor.
Le Vaudor.
Yeah.
So this is an opera about Mephistopheles trying to tempt Faust into hell. And I put this picture in here because I was looking at this YouTube video. I was like, I have to put this in the notes. This is crazy. But the song that is playing throughout all of this is Mephistopheles like having just basically beating the streets, like fucking with Faust and Wagner and like some other people, and singing this irreverent song about a giant golden calf. And then if you look it up on YouTube, like the opera made a giant golden calf. It is huge. And I just love this image. And I love the idea of this, right? Like obviously this is the song itself is like we're getting everybody together to get drunk and worship this pagan altar basically, and this is what Hannibal is doing, right? He's gathering up his meats, he's pulling in the harvest, and he's killing. Like this is fun for him. This is the first time that the Ripper has ripped truly in 2 years as he starts killing these people and collecting their meat. And we see him like package this meat very carefully and prepare it and put it in little freezer bags and put it in his freezer, and it's so delightful. What is in that pantry? Hannibal?
And it's also like, inspiration struck again, which I find really interesting that it would strike in this moment, right, where he's like both very in control of what's going on, right? He has his hands all over Jack Crawford. He has his hands all over Will Graham, all over Alana Bloom. Like he seems to have everything very much in his control. And yet on his personal life, like there also seems to be a level of like longing for connection with other people. And so therefore like a loss of control. Like he cannot control who he gets like emotionally intimate with, let's put it that way. Because the people that he would want to have those friendships with are basically like, yeah, I don't know, there has to be some kind of distance between us. And I just like that difference between like being in control and lacking control is just so delicious to me.
It's the question you asked earlier, which is like, what has he been doing for the last 2 years, I think is really insightful, especially because we're seeing him be inspired by this. And if we it's difficult to tell like how much time has passed since we've begun the show, since Hannibal has met Will and they've started doing all of this. We get the impression that it's several months though, right? Like we get the impression that it's not just like this hasn't all happened in a week. Like this is all happening over the course of months. And I would imagine if we look at his life, the only thing we really know about him is that he has had this practice, and presumably he's been working with patients like Franklin, and we see him be incredibly bored and getting no inspiration whatsoever from Franklin. So being pulled into this, meeting Will Graham, establishing a new closer working relationship with Alana, having this connection to Jack Crawford, having this child murderer baby and Abigail, like obviously probably did inspire him, right? Like these are the things that he lives for. And it's interesting that you said that he's in control of all this, because this to me feels like him just creating chaos of just, even though he's like a controlled form of chaos, but he's pushing all of these buttons, not necessarily knowing where they'll go, like having a good idea, but not knowing exactly what will happen, just causing all of this chaos around him and being like, all right, all of this is established, like time to throw a feast, like let's go, I'm ready. It's so good. It's just so good.
I love that, actually.
We get some comedy beats too, because after this montage, we go to the morgue where there's now 4 bodies. The Ripper has killed his 3. They talk about the organs being removed. One guy's like, a spleen. Who the heck needs a spleen transplant? Still thinking this is organ harvesters. And then it just cuts immediately to like a blender, like chopping up a bunch of pink slush. Like just so good.
It's so funny. It is so funny. Like it's very dark humor, but it is so funny, and I love it.
It's what my friend Gary calls a rough chuckle, and it's a real rough chuckle.
Very true.
They talk about one of the people missing part of their intestine, and it's like, either we're looking for a person with a short intestine, or the Ripper is making sausage, and then we see the Ripper literally making sausage. It was everything. Was it the last episode? I think that you mentioned sausage making or something. I can't remember.
I know. I said something about like how we don't want to see how the sausage is made, and today we literally see how the sausage is made. And I think I DM'd you that. I was like, I can't believe that I said that.
And of course,
that will have people screaming for sure.
I was using stuff like that for the video that we made, so I like knew that was coming, and I've just been waiting. So it's just been really. I do a lot of waiting for you to find out things on this podcast. Will still thinks that there's 2 killers. That at least one is the Ripper.
And Jack is really not happy about that.
From here, we go back to Hannibal's office, where Franklin has arrived for his next appointment. And Franklin is very excited because he has spotted Hannibal shopping for cheese at the local cheesery. He says he says cheese is my passion. He asked if Hannibal has ever heard of Tyromancy, which is the divinization of cheese, which I could not believe was a real thing when I looked it up on Google.
I know, right? Same. I had to look it up. I was like, what is this?
What is this? And how do I get involved, frankly? Like,
how do I get... So just again, like not knowing what's going to happen, but seeing the way that things are moving with Franklin and Hannibal, and knowing that there's an episode called Fromage later, which is French for cheese, I'm like, he's going to eat Franklin. Like, that's what's going to happen. I'm like, he's gonna eat Franklin. Poor baby Franklin.
Poor Franklin. He's obviously trying to make this connection with Hannibal. He's spotted Hannibal at like the best dairy place in Baltimore or whatever, and Hannibal just has this like kind of throwaway line of, it's a very small town, and he says as much as he loves cheese, Tobias doesn't eat dairy. And when Hannibal says, do you desire Tobias sexually, Franklin gets very defensive, and is like, oh, no, it's not like that at all. Like, don't get me wrong, I was in a fraternity, I did things, but like, it's not my brand. And I'm like, what does that fucking mean, man? Like, what do you...
I mean, listen, I have so many questions, although like, anyway, many that I don't want answers. But yeah, this was really surprising to me that he was like not actually in a relationship with Tobias, or maybe he's just like not just denying it, even though that's what may be happening. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there.
Yeah, it could even be, and this is just speculation, I don't actually know or remember exactly, but it could be like Franklin has tried, right, and Tobias shut him down. So now maybe now it's like, oh, no, it's not my thing. And Hannibal, I think, picks up on a little bit of this, because he says, Tobias is your best friend, but you're not his best friend. And I'm like, ouch, Hannibal, please don't ever say that about me, about anybody. It's such a harsh thing to hear.
It is, and the body language really changes in this moment. Like the whole scene, it's so telling what happens, right? Like at first, like you said, Franklin is like sit on the edge of his seat, like he's so excited to be like talking to Hannibal about cheese, and he's even like touching Hannibal's leg at one point, like to his great displeasure, to be honest. And as someone who does not like to be touched casually like that, I totally get it. Like, get your hands off of me, right? Like,
oh yeah,
and then like. He gets really defensive about Tobias. Like he bolts back, like right back into his seat, and he crosses his legs immediately. And he's trying to put like as much distance between him and Hannibal as possible. And again, like it's like, but you were so like, I thought that you fancied Hannibal, right? Like I can't. Anyway. And throughout the exchange, like Hannibal is sitting back with his legs crossed, like his hands like holding on to one another. So again, like there's this idea of like distance and like crossing away this person, like that he finds so vulgar, right? Like,
yes, absolutely. My oncologist, I guess because he's used to like having very serious conversations with people, like I'll be sitting in the chair when I go to, you know, have an appointment with him, and he's on one of those little rolly around doctor stool things. And he gets so close to me that like if I'm sitting down and my legs are like apart from one another, right? Like if I'm doing the man spread thing, like his leg is like up, his knee is like up to my thigh. And I'm like, my dude, I need you to like, this is maybe like, and I've gotten to the point where like, I'm like kind of sitting to the side a little bit with like my knees like touching one another just to like maybe not get that level of intimacy. And I think he's just doing it to be like, I'm talking to you seriously about a serious thing. And I'm like, well, you are, but you're also like about
in my bubble.
Yeah. We're about to find there's only one bed at the hospital, man. Well, come on, we gotta get rid of this. I'm sorry, doctor.
Oh my god. There's just one bed in this hospital.
There's only one bed in the hospital. I'm sorry. And I have to spend the night with you, Jeremy, to make sure that you're okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Between this and the Tell Me Dean, like we are just inventing fanfic for the people out there.
I love this.
We're inspired.
I mean, listen, maybe inspiration will strike for all of these fanfic.
Can't wait.
Okay.
Franklin,
I'm gonna sidestep that.
Continues to talk. He says that he's not necessarily. He says he's not worried about being alone, but he describes being alone as a dull ache in the stomach, and he doesn't want to hurt. He's more worried about being hurt. And I find that fascinating to relay like this feeling of loneliness into a feeling in your gut and not wanting to feel the pain of that, as opposed to like again, Franklin distances himself and creating this outside persona of himself to try to impress the people around him, just like Hannibal is doing, but obviously doing a much better job, or much worse job, excuse me. And I love this cut too, because he describes that he doesn't want to be hurt, and then we cut to Hannibal, who opens the door fully expecting Will to be there, and he goes through all of the emotions that anybody has ever gone through that has been stood up on a date before, like double checking the watch, straightening things that don't need to be straightened. He's double checking his like appointment calendar, and he looks so sad. And I know this is so off topic, and I apologize about this, but again, I was going down the rabbit hole on the music stuff this morning. I mentioned earlier this was Chopin, and I was wrong. This is Requiem in D minor, K626, Lacrimosa by Mozart. And there's nothing. Gosh. I didn't find any like specific things. Like there's a couple of things about like this song, this music like creating longing. But I need to put a marker in, because I'm gonna put in the track. Everybody's gonna recognize the track when I put it in, and I just want to read you some of the YouTube comments if you don't mind.
Please.
It's been 231 years since this song was written, and it's still fire. 4 years ago, me at the dinner table laughing alone in the candlelight of day 100 of quarantine.
Oh.
And that's 4 years ago, so that was during quarantine.
Yeah.
2 years ago from Psycho Hall. This one's a little bit longer, so I apologize. When the antagonist has nothing left to lose and has already stained his hands with blood, he drinks a glass of wine while a candle is lit on a large table in an open space with a crystal chandelier hanging on the ceiling. Elegantly, he slices through the steak, closing his eyes and savoring every ounce of taste while laughing hysterically and crying at the same time and saying, yes, it's so good, yes. He gluttonously savors his meal with impeccable haste and finally inhales and exhales gently. Afterward, he wipes his mouth with a white handkerchief with grace and is seen exiting the room while a bright light blinds the audience as if he completely and freely accepting his inevitable fate, death. Just how are you going so hard, YouTube commenters? That's crazy.
Seriously,
this is insane. But it was so Hannibal coded.
Are you sure you're reading from? Are you sure you're reading from YouTube and not AO3?
I don't.
Going on here?
And like every response to that was like, you should put this on. Are you a writer? Like it was crazy. But yeah, this song is so like it's so moody. It reminds me of like the Vampire Lestat like playing the piano for Louis in the movie. It's just. Anyway, I know I'm taking us on very long tangents this episode, and I apologize.
No, I mean, I think, but I think it fits, right? Like that's exactly what's going on with Hannibal here, and like I said, like Hannibal makes allowances for Will that he doesn't for other people because like standing somebody up is rude, right? And I think that if this was anybody else, Hannibal would probably be asking for their business card at this point, but for Will, and cut to Will.
we cut to Will, who is dreaming. He is sitting across the body that we saw in the first episode that was mounted on the antlers that we think that the Ripper was doing the copycat of Jacob Hobbs. And Abigail is saying it's so much better with just the two of us. And then as we hear someone calling for Will, she says, Dad, there's someone else here. We haven't really been talking about Abigail a whole lot. I keep bringing her up, but like the show hasn't been really referring to her very much. And again, I think this is just like reminding us, oh hey, this chick exists, and you guys are kind of setting yourselves up as her father, especially Will, right? So,
I also, anyway, I didn't spend too much time on that, but I was trying to figure out like who was the body on the antlers, and I was like, is that Mads? Is that Hannibal? Like I wasn't sure, but I don't know.
I used that as a part of the video, so I should probably know, but I wasn't paying attention. I just assumed it was, dead girl number 3 in the credits or whatever.
Or maybe, I believe it's a man because like there's, or anyway, like I don't know, but it's, there's somebody on the antlers, and I was trying to figure out if it was Garrett Jacob Hobbs, but I was like, that looks like Mads. And so I don't know.
We'll have to, listeners, you guys know better than we do. You're gonna have to
exactly.
You're gonna have to go tell us what's going on.
Please tell us.
There.
We don't know. We're very confused.
Very confused. Will fell asleep, sort of. He was just sitting there with his eyes open, not being present. And as Hannibal arrives to his office to try to figure out, like, hey, where the fuck are you? Why aren't you at my house?
Right.
He used Find My iPhone on Will. It was like, why are you still at work? We should be hanging out.
It's like, yeah, why are you still at work?
Right?
He's like, calling him, like, when are you going to be home? Like,
exactly. Yeah, like, you told me you would be home by 8, and you're not. Like, what is going on right now?
All I can see right now is, like, these cartoon characters of, like, Hannibal just, like, angrily walking in, like, to Will's office, like, picking him up and just taking him home and sitting him down and giving him a glass of wine or something. Like, he's like, you're supposed to be home right now.
Which absolutely exists on Tumblr. Like, you could definitely find
sure
that kind. Will says that he should stop sleeping altogether, and it's the best way to avoid bad dreams. And Hannibal looks over and says, well, I can see what's causing you bad dreams. On Will's desk is just a bunch of picture of the Ripper's kills. And you could just see the delight in Hannibal as he gets to look at his work with his bestie, with his little boyfriend, and gets to talk about it, even in like a separated way. Like you could just tell that he's excited about this. And Will even invites him. He's like, tell me what you see, Doctor. And they discuss the Ripper's kills, and he says, these are the Ripper's enemies. And Will says, these aren't the Ripper's enemies; they are pests. He dissected them to disgrace them as a public shaming. And Hannibal looks up and he's like, oh my God, this man sees me. This is,
I know.
I am, holy shit, this man sees me maybe a little bit more than I was originally anticipating. Like, this is a little much.
He's like, that's so hot. I love that.
But he just can't.
Please know me, Will.
He can't resist, and he says he takes the organs away because because in his mind they don't deserve them. And Will says
Yeah.
yes, and then like you could tell like this is a moment for Will, who's like, oh, like it just illuminates something in his brain about the Ripper, and it's so good. Like, and again, and it's that Hannibal is unable to resist. Like, this is him like peeking past that human veil, right, to move it over a little bit, and it's so good.
Exactly. It's like, it's the desire. I saw it also like as the desire to connect to the one person that he knows is able to understand him. Like that conversation with Bedelia and Franklin, like they've really had an effect on him. And he's like, he doesn't want to be alone and to feel that dull ache inside of him, right? Like,
poor Hannibal. Poor cannibalistic
I'm like,
serial killing.
Am I affording him like too much humanity? I don't know.
And then Hannibal pulls out a picture of Miriam Lass's arm. And this conversation is just so fucking hilarious and great. You know, Hannibal basically just is like, what's this? And Will tells him, and Hannibal's like, well, it looks like he was trying to humiliate someone. I think Will says this doesn't fit because he wasn't trying to humiliate Miriam Lass. We didn't see her on display. And he says he was humiliating someone. And Will points out he was humiliating Jack. And Will just looks him directly like, did it work? And I'm like, excuse me, my friend. Well, you can't just ask that. Like, that's impossible. Oh my God. Did it work?
Right?
Oh my God.
It's so, like, again, like Hannibal is like towing that line between like the normal human person, like the well-tailored human suit, and like his true nature, and like the performance of one like tipping into the other. Like, it's just, it's
a lot. It's a lot. Meanwhile, Beverly has done some science work, I guess. She's been looking for what she called the kill truck for their organ harvester, and they found like some video of a private ambulance leaving the crime scene, which is a little unusual because it left empty. And then they tracked the ambulance down. Well, they decided to go get Will because this is a hot lead. And of course, Hannibal is still in Will's office, and Jack asked, "Would you care to help us catch the Ripper?" And Hannibal just, his eyes light up. It's like, "Oh, of course I would, absolutely."
Like, how could I refuse?
And then we go and meet like the ambulance company manager, who says like, "Oh, this was checked in, but it turns out the ambulance is not there." And Beverly is like, "Science, science, science! I know how to track it down." And Hannibal is like watching all of this, and he just looks at Will, and this is maybe one of my favorite lines of the show, where he just looks at Will and says, "This is all very educational." And I'm just, it's so like, we've seen Hannibal be close to, like, he's been at the crime scene before, right? Like with Will and Abigail and all that went down, but like this is him like on the trail of a killer, probably for the first time, like seeing how they operate, like as if he was one of them. And this is very educational. It's such a good, like, just understated, hilarious line. Like, again, who is he performing for? Who's the joke for, if not for me? Like, it's like he's looking out of the world and seeing a stage that nobody else sees, right? Like he's seeing an audience that nobody else sees. And I love this so much.
I completely agree with you. Like, this is, I think I DM'd you, like, Hannibal saying this is very educational when looking at like how certain things work, like in law enforcement, is absolutely scary, right? Like, it's absolutely terrifying. And then like on second watch, I kind of realized that, like, ironically, I think that this whole episode is sort of meant to get the audience to relate to Hannibal, right? Like, particularly to relate to like his loneliness, to his isolation, like to his constant like masking and hiding of who he is. And so even though we literally see him like cooking human beings, we also see him like being moved by music, being like annoyed that someone likes him who he doesn't like back, being happy when he finds out that he got revenge on somebody who tried to stop him. We see him like being sad that the boy he likes doesn't seem to like him back, and we see him being funny. And again, like, I knew that this was coming, but like, I love this character, Jeremy. Like, what
so
is happening to me?
It's so good. This is, I mean, you just love to hate this man, like you hate to love this man. Like, it's just so impossible. It's that's what I think makes the show so great, is like just this fictional character who is so incredibly awful. And just continuously compels you to like him. Like, you get caught in his web. And that's one thing that, the great portrayals of Hannibal Lecter that we've seen throughout the years, Anthony Hopkins in the original Silence of the Lambs and Mads Mikkelsen now, that's what they do very well. Is they give this like otherworldly being a human persona and like pull you into it. And it's just very, very good. So we have to do crime stuff. They have found the ambulance. Yeah. They've tracked it down. They find this man wrist deep into his victim, trying to steal some organs. He can't lift up his arms as Jack orders him to do. Jack's carried around a shotgun because apparently he's an action movie superstar. They call Hannibal over, and Hannibal says he was removing his kidney poorly. And I'm like, damn, dude, got him.
Did you see how like the guy, like the killer, like looks up at him like he's so mad? He's like, what?
And there was a line about him, like the killer, like taking his MCAT or whatever. Like he was trying to be a doctor. This dude just totally fucking dismissed his technique. It's very funny to me.
Yeah, I love that. He's like, because to Hannibal, like what's really upsetting isn't so much that he's removing the kidney, right? It's that he's doing it poorly. He's like, that is so offensive.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's not the removal of the kidney. It's the technique involved.
Exactly.
Hannibal takes over the surgery as they arrest the killer. Throughout all of this, Patria Operessa from Macbeth is playing from Giuseppe Verdi. And I tried to find, I don't know if you ever tried to read a plot of an opera before. It's a lot. It's a lot of proper nouns that you have to figure out. And I couldn't really find any connecting piece to this. And I think they just picked it because it sounds cool, because it does sound extremely, extremely cool. So this just sounds good. And I just wanted to mention it since I've mentioned every other piece of music, mainly because I think this is the first episode that has used any kind of non-original music in it whatsoever. So I thought that was kind of, that's the reason that I've taken that deep dive down here. As this happens, Jack moves to the side of the ambulance and everybody kind of follows him to collect this murderer. Will is left alone looking inside the ambulance and watching Hannibal work. And as the music kind of swells, we see Will observing maybe a little bit more than he usually does. And I put the question in my note, like, does he realize something? And that question was directed at you, Mary. I don't know if you realized that.
Yes, I did. I did because I thought about it, and I have some notes about my answers. And the reality is that I'm of two minds here, because one maybe is just like us. Maybe he is just like us, and he just thought that this was incredibly hot. So that's one option, because I'm definitely sitting like square right there. Or two, he's like starting to see the outline of a pattern that he's not quite recognizing yet, right? Like we talk about autistic people as being excellent at pattern recognition, and I think that Will is particularly good at that, recognizing patterns. And I think that in this moment he kind of sees something, but he's not quite able to tell what it is yet. Maybe a little bit like Bedelia about how she says, like, you know, I see that this isn't you, but you know, I see the suit, but I don't know what's underneath. Like, I feel like maybe Will got a peek behind the veil there, right? But he doesn't quite know what he just saw.
Maybe he got a peek of the veil, right? Like
of the veil, maybe, yeah.
Maybe he is realizing for the first time, as Bedelia had to do at some point, that has not been talking to the real Hannibal, that there could be something more there, that he actually sees, like you said, see the outline of this person's suit, see the outline of this veil around him or something. And who knows? We don't know. There's no way to possibly know the answer to that question until 2 weeks from now when you listen to Root Eats number 8.
Oh, we're going to find out? Really? Oh my God. Okay. I'm so excited now to go watch the next one.
I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say, like, the whole show is kind of about Will looking at Hannibal and going, huh?
Yeah. But see, I think that kind of creates like an interest, and I'm going to get to that when we get to the next scene, but like I think that this kind of creates an interest in Will of Hannibal, right? That because I think in the first episode he says, like, I don't find you particularly interesting, and then Hannibal says, like, you will.
Yes.
And I think that this is where Will is starting to find him interesting.
It's fascinating. I wish I could. I'm glad I can. Let me just say that. It's just fascinating. We will continue to talk. we do this podcast until there's no more
Oh
talk
my
about Hannibal anymore. We go from here to Hannibal's kitchen. He's brought in a team of helpers to help him prepare this meal. This is the night of his feast, and he's enjoying himself. We see him like sautéing meats. We see him drinking wine. He tells Will, who we realize is in the room, that he has a butcher that can get him sow's blood, which he blends and uses to create a transparent liquid that he can suspend fruit in for a very sweet treat at the end of the meal. This is why when you said that this episode was fruity, I was like, sometimes quite literally, like he's literally serving sweet treats at the end of this meal made with fruit. Will is there, not dressed for a dinner party, but with a bottle of wine, which he even looks weird just holding a bottle of wine. It's so strange.
I know, right?
And he says he's not coming, but he does say that Hannibal saved the guy's life. Like if it wasn't for him, the guy that being operated on wouldn't have survived. And Will says, I forgot that you were a surgeon. Why did you quit? And Hannibal says, and I think I actually spoiled this for you last episode, so apologies, but he quit because he lost a patient. He lost a patient, which Will says like, that had to happen all the time. He's like, well, it happened one too many times. So he changed his passion from anatomy to the culinary arts, and he started becoming a psychiatrist. And he says, no one has died for my therapy.
Yet.
But also, like, we don't know about these victims. And like one of the things that they were trying to Miriam was tracking down was like his relationship with his patients, right? Like that was one of the things they were looking at. So who knows? Maybe other people have died. So who knows?
Well, yeah. So yes, who knows? That's right. I think so. Again, like I think Franklin is in danger. Like he is in critical danger right now. Like to be served as fromage. Like that is what I think might be happening. But I also think that like Hannibal is also so good at like telling these half truths, right? So I wrote in my notes like I need to know more about this because like I'm sure that there's like a part of truth here. So I think that maybe no one has died that was his therapy patient. Right. But there's also definitely something behind the veil. So like people have probably died from other things than his therapy. Right. So like yes, there you go. So good.
Will says that he's not going to be able to attend the dinner because he has a quote unquote date with the Ripper, who obviously was not the organ harvester. And Hannibal says Jack must be devastated because he lost his opportunity to, catch the Ripper. Your note in here is incredible, and I want you to talk about it. I just read it and I was like, what the fuck? What is this? Because I know AO3, but I don't like spend a lot of time on AO3, so I've never seen this tag before. I'm just fascinated.
Okay, so like I wrote that like so because your last note is like Jack must be devastated, and I'm like Hannibal is devastated here because like Will basically has a date with him, but he doesn't know that it's him, and I'm like this would be tagged as a 2-person love triangle as a chick on the triangle.
I love it. Absolutely adore this. It's so fun.
Think of like You've Got Mail. That's a 2-person love triangle.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Cool.
So that's what's going on, right? Literally, where like the Ripper is Hannibal, but Will doesn't know that the Ripper is Hannibal. Hannibal knows that the Ripper is Hannibal, and he really wants Will, but Will wants the Ripper. Like, there you go. That's your 2-person love triangle.
This is so good. And Will leaves. He kind of smiles at Hannibal and then leaves.
Right. He smiles at Hannibal. And I don't, like, have we seen Will smile before in this show?
Because like like not often,
right?
I think.
There you go. Because he definitely like forces a smile here when he leaves, like, and like he's making eye contact with Hannibal, like, and I just like the fact that he came like to bring a bottle of wine, like, again, maybe he really did think that the surgery thing was just hot. Like he's like,
maybe so.
This is really interesting to me.
Or he suspects something, right? Like he got a peek of the veil, and so he's worried about it.
But would he show up if he was worried? No, you show up with a bottle of wine because you're interested. I'm sorry.
I'll agree with you there. I can't argue that.
Do you show up at like serial killers' homes with a bottle of wine, or do you show up like at somebody's home with a bottle of wine when you're interested in them? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, either socially or personally or romantically or whatever. Yeah. You bring the wine over when you want to bond with the person, not when you are worried that they are a serial killer. You're absolutely right. Although Will different is all I'm saying. Will is a little different.
That's true.
Remember
That's
Beverly?
true. That's true.
You're a little different.
You're a little different. Yeah.
We covered Jack, who has stared at the wall of the Ripper kills, and he finally leaves the morgue without any kind of interruption. And we get this final scene of a long camera sweep over Hannibal's table where we can see all of the delicious dishes that he has made. I hope they actually got to eat this dinner. I meant to try to look that up, but like, Jesus Christ. Like, I hope the cast just like got to have this dinner, right? Like, it looks so good. And because I've been on such a music kick on this, I was like, well, this sounds like opera. And people who listen to the podcast might recognize this track. Jake did a fantastic remix. Did like some scratching on it too, which was sick.
Yes.
And I use that as the outro of every song, every podcast. And I was like, I wonder what this is from. I wonder if there's like, this is celebrating a big. No. This is just an original music track for the song that show Hannibal. This is Brian Ritzell just doing his thing, and it's so good. And I kind of love this. The camera pans up and we see Hannibal basking in the glory. Everyone's applauding him, including Alana, who was there. I was actually, and I think they just filled this in. Like the lady from the opera is there too. I was surprised that Chilton wasn't here. Kind of expected him to be, even though, and it's a very like Avengers Endgame kind of way of like, let's get all of the team next together or whatever. But like, I'm fine that he isn't. And he says, I must warn you first that nothing here is vegetarian. And then he looks at everybody and says, bon appetit.
I was like, just like our podcast.
Just like the podcast.
I love that so much. Thank you for doing that. That was such a great idea. Like, it's so funny. I saw that and I was like, Jeremy is so smart. Like, that was my first thought. I was like, thank you so much for doing that. I love it. It's also so extra.
It's
like,
extremely extra. Yeah. This is so good. And this is, I think we've seen like implications that he's feeding people human meat, right? Like we've seen at a dinner with Jack where he talks about a rabbit, and we see him like hunting down somebody in the woods. We've seen him harvest organs, but not necessarily directly feed them afterwards. This is, I think, our very first like underlined confirmation that he is killing people with express purpose of harvesting their organs to turn them into dishes to feed his friends and acquaintances in his social circle, including maybe one of his romantic interests, Alana.
I know.
Just awful. You shouldn't feed people human meat. I don't know if I need to tell you that. I don't know. You should probably heard that before in your life, but you shouldn't do this.
Thanks for the
this
reminder.
Is wrong.
I appreciate it.
But also, how fucking cool is this? Like, how evil and just like, God,
so evil.
I want to say delicious, but I shouldn't say delicious to describe this. But just how like incredibly satisfyingly evil is this?
I mean, I think it's one of those like. Because this show is a lot about like the unspeakable, right? And there was an actual the unmentionables, I think, right? Like an actual conversation about that. And I think that this is kind of like one of those things where I think we've all fantasized about like doing something that is absolutely unmentionable, just like out of pettiness or revenge or whatever, like just and like most people won't actually act on that, which, is probably for the best. But Hannibal does. And there's something like, I don't know, there's something like kind of titillating almost about like this human being that does those things that like most of us would never do, right? Because we find them to be like evil and repulsive, and yet like he gives into his most base, like animalistic almost instincts. I don't know. I think that there's something to explore there.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason that like villains are hot, right? Like I think that's the reason that people look at the villains of Disney movies and go, "Yeah, I'd take that down, no problem." I got that.
I remember after Moana came out, and like people were like, "I want to fuck the crab." I was like, "Yeah, I get that."
I haven't seen Moana, but like I definitely don't have any sort of surprise at that anymore whatsoever. doing a podcast about Dark Souls for so long, you realize that there's a healthy part of that community that wants to fuck the old werewolf guy. So like,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I did a whole podcast about that. We had four
about wanting to fuck the old werewolf guy.
Yeah. This is again off topic, and I apologize. For episode 69 of my old podcast, Don't Give Up Skeleton, I called it Nice, and I got a bunch of like fanfic writers on to talk about like their relationship with blah blah blah, like all of the characters and like the romantic interest and the shipping and things like that. And then for episode 169, I did Spice, and I did all of the old man monster fucking kind of stuff. Like I got fanfic writers and artists and stuff that depicted that stuff and interviewed them about it on one podcast, and it was pretty fun. It's pretty good.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was. If you want to hear about monster fucking, don'tgiveupskeleton.com/169. This episode is so good, and it leaves our characters in such interesting places. I think Jack is like missed his opportunity again. It's something that the show doesn't underline very well. Like we see him walking away and like looking at the Ripper, but like at the beginning of the episode, he was like, he's going to kill 3. I think this is the first. This is my opportunity to kill him. I will not lose it, and he's lost it. And we're seeing him slowly becoming unraveled. Something is up with Will. We don't quite know what. Either he's fallen in love, or he's seen Hannibal in a different way, or maybe both. Alana seems to be being seduced by Hannibal in a weird way. I can't wait to see where that's going. And yeah, just like, again, to take it all back to our performance theme, just Hannibal putting on a literal performance at the end after spending the whole episode performing for other people in different roles is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to say about this episode apart from the fact that it was absolutely amazing, and yeah, probably my favorite episode so far that we have seen together. like
God, what
mind blowing.
What else could happen in the show to make you like it even more? I wonder out loud with my mouth. What,
oh no, I'm so scared.
What else could possibly happen? I cannot wait to watch Hannibal season 1, episode 8 later tonight with my wife. I'm gonna have a good time. So,
all right. Is there anything else that you want to bring up before we move on to the review section?
Yeah, I have a 45-minute dissertation about the opera. No, I'm kidding. Let's jump into reviews. All right, let's lead with your review, Mary.
So I am going to give this episode 4 stars. I would give it more, 10 stars if I could, because like I said, it's my favorite so far. So with its fruity notes of blood red berries and its hint of loneliness, this sweet and sour sorbet provided a timely and deviously refreshing break from the exquisite meal we've been having so far.
I'm also going to give it 4 stars. I consider this a welcome fruity break from entrees filled with organ meat. Yum. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We very much appreciate it. If you would like to support us, you can do so by leaving ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or commenting on and liking us on Spotify. And more importantly, just telling all of your cannibal friends, like, hey, these guys don't judge you. You eat human meat, and these podcasters won't judge you for that. So you should go listen to their podcast.
They will probably find you hot for it.
Yeah, we probably find you a little sexy, depending on the way you're dressed while you're cooking human meat for me.
Exactly.
RootEats.cool is the place you can find all of our past episodes. Mary, where else can you be found on the internet?
I can be found at MaryTurner_ on Twitter, and at Carrying Wayward if you're interested in a supernatural podcast, and the Gentleman Pirates Library if you like our Flag Means Death. What about you, Jeremy?
I'm at JG Greer on Twitter. You can find all of my podcasts about Supernatural, Merlin, X-Files, and what is the most recent? Cowboy Bebop is the most recent one we are putting out publicly. We can find all of those at creepybutnecessary.cool. And we'll be back in a couple of more weeks. And until then, remember to... That's not the way that goes.
Stay spooky. Stay hungry.
Right? We'll be back in a couple of weeks. And until then, bon appetit.
Bon appetit, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm it's still early for me. I got up super early though, but I'm okay. I'm doing well. I ordered all the groceries. So
Oh, that's good.
they're done.
That's really good.
Tomorrow
Did you
is
have
Labor
to use
Day.
any business cards for that, or
No business cards. I've what do you think Hannibal does when he runs out of rude people? Probably doesn't happen, huh? Like in a modern society, it just doesn't happen.
Oh no. I mean, all he would have to do would be like go to, I don't know, where are people rude? Like just
The Best Buy.
the Best Buy. Yes, exactly.
I feel like it's this is probably podcast material and not outtakes material, but it was interesting to me that all of his business cards were like management and not retail service workers. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes,
not like
I did like that.
Yeah, just like people that like own the place were shitty, not people that like are working for minimum wage or something. So.
So because of the transcripts that I've been doing, I'm re-listening like in depth to everything that we've recorded so far. And one of the things that we were saying was that, like, forget eat the rich, it has to be eat the rude. But I think maybe you were right when you said maybe both. We can do both.
Can do both. Yeah. Well, the rich are often rude, right? Like I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think so. All right, hold on. What am I looking for? Why is this so difficult today? Oh yeah, Sorbet. Okay, I've got my notes out. So I'm like, oh my god.
I added. I'm gonna go ahead and start recording in Zencaster.
Sure.
I added a bunch of stuff to the bottom. I want to talk about some of the music in this episode, not extensively, but I think I was telling Autumn, like, I just added a paragraph worth of notes, so we're probably going to get off the rails on this one. She's like, good, I want you to. She's like, I've watched this episode 3 times with you now. I want you to get off the rails on it. So, not actually 3.
I love this so
2
much.
times,
I'm
and
so
then
excited.
I fast-forwarded through it this morning
I'm so
looking for
excited.
music. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Oh, it's a good thing we have the outtakes, because, like, I am not used to speaking to human beings that are not my child at like 8:15 in the morning on a Sunday morning.
You got to warm up the pipes. Got to get them loosey-goosey.
Oh, yeah. I know, right?
This is how
It's good.
outtakes started with me and Chris, basically. Well, I mean, technically it started with just like dumb shit we would say, and then like it just started becoming like, oh, let's warm up the pipes and just have a conversation, and then it just became like a 30-minute convo before the podcast. So,
Oh my god. Well, I mean, and people love it, right? So
yeah, people
I
seem
guess
to
it
enjoy
works
it.
out. So what are your plans for today?
As little as possible.
Oh, good.
Autumn is planning on making dumplings today.
Ooh.
And then we're going to prepare to make like a Greek feast tomorrow. So we're doing like some chicken shawarma. We bought pita, but we might just make our own pita. Like we've got one of those like pizza oven things, so we can kind of flash them real quick.
Oh, perfect.
She's found some recipe for like a Greek style potato salad. So we'll do something like that. And then this is coming out way later. Yeah. Chris and I are trying to do some like Halloween stuff for October. So I told him the original plan was like, I'll choose 2 horror movies and you choose 2 horror movies, and we'll release like one a week. And then we started doing Game of Thrones, and I was like, you know what? I'll do one. And his fiance Jess requested that we do commentary for Twilight, the first Twilight movie. So we're gonna be, and I've never seen any Twilight movies, so I've never read any Twilight books. So it's been a thing for a while that we talk about. So I'm probably gonna try to convince Autumn to watch Pearl, which is a slasher movie from Ty West and Mia Goth, which is one of my favorites. So
That is so exciting. I'm also somebody who hasn't seen or read any of the Twilight books, movies. Yep. Absolutely.
Wow, that's so.
I know.
I expect it to be solo.
That's so rare.
Because it's just like a fandom thing, right? Like even like in the genres that you and I deal in, like it's such a huge one.
I know. Rochelle actually really wants me to watch Twilight for Carrying Wayward. Actually, she's like, you
that's
have
funny.
to.
Well, now you can watch it with Jeremy and Chris talking over on the top of it, so that'll be even better. So
I do think that'll make it better.
It has to make it like somewhat better. I can't wait. We did the thing with we did that with Shrek, and I'd never seen Shrek, and
You've never seen Shrek?
I'd never seen Shrek. I know.
What?
And it was such an experience because like that movie is not aimed at like 40-year-old dudes by any stretch of the imagination. Like I think that movie is aimed at like a certain generation and has become like a thing for 40-year-old dudes who have watched it their entire lives. And I am not that guy. So I was just like, what is this disgusting green animal? Like I was just horrified by the entire thing. It was so gross. So I'm really looking forward to Twilight being very similar. Just being like, what in the fuck is going on? What is happening?
Oof. Well, I mean, Twilight is definitely not aimed at 40-year-old dudes either.
Not at all.
To be
not
fair.
All.
So you are not the target audience for that. Definitely. But I did read a tweet. Somebody was talking about how Shrek was actually like pretty like a big change in the way that we told fairy tales, because they were like, it showed that like you didn't have to be pretty in order to be good, right? Like good and pretty don't necessarily go together.
I like that. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I try to think about a Shrek as little as possible in my daily life, but
you know that now, like, all the kids hear the Smash Mouth song and they're like, oh, it's the Shrek song. And I'm like, it was a song before.
It was a song before. You guys co-opted it. This was our music.
This was our music. It's so funny. Like, we used to sing it I was in high school and we used to, like, just sing it in the hallways, like, sitting down.
Yeah, like that song was like an earworm, right? Like it was like the Chumbawamba song. Like that thing never died. So
yeah. It was lovely. Oh my God, I'm feeling all nostalgic for high school. Like, who am I? What is happening?
The high school I graduated from, it looked so much like a prison from the outside. Just big, huge square boxes next to each other, like cinder block square boxes that were just painted in like the ugliest beige color you can imagine. And I happen to be back up there. Like I live 3 or 4 hours from it now, and I happen to be back up there. So I was like, you know what? Let's see what the old nostalgia button will produce. And I drove by it, and I guess they closed the fucker down. Like it's not even a school anymore. And I was like, oh, okay, well, see you later.
Oh no!
That's how much I keep up with all of my old high school friends, right?
Yeah, clearly. My high school was right next to a cemetery.
Excellent.
And yes, exactly. And so we would always say that, like, once we were done with high school, that's where we would all end up anyway. So it didn't really matter.
Hanging out with the goth
the
kids.
The existential dread of the early 2000s, you know?
I got out a little bit before that. I graduated in 98. So I was a little bit ahead of you. And so I never hit like the early like existential crisis 2000s, but we were all like told that everything would be possible if you went to college. That was the big thing. Like you just go to college and like your life is set. Like that was like you have to go to college no matter what. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't want to do that. Like I was like, I don't want to do any more of this. This sucks. Yeah. And I liked learning and everything. I just didn't like school. So it was kind of a weird situation.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I have a lot of thoughts about how those two things don't necessarily go together, unfortunately.
Right.
Learning and school, like they can be separate. You can learn without going to school. I'm
playing this very weird video game called Harold Halibut. And you play the character Harold Halibut, and right now like we're in a weird like spaceship that crashed under the sea, and then we've been here for 100 years, and I'm like the janitor or whatever, so I'm just like walking around and talking to people. And one of the conversations I had recently was with this kid. And the kid was like, you know, I really don't like going to school or whatever. You know, I found like I learned more stuff on my own and doing it my own way. And your character, Harold, is like, well, you know, you can do both. Like you could go to school and learn what they teach you and learn, you know, stuff on your own. And the kid says, I guess it would be good to know everything. I just started laughing. It's just such a good line. Like, oh, that's the way to learn everything, school and on my own.
That is so sweet. I love it so much. Oh my God.
It's a very weird game. Like so far, it's literally just walking around and doing conversations. It's very strange. I found a weird alien, so I'm trying to get him healed up so I can talk to a weird alien guy.
Of course you would find a weird alien.
Of course.
Just nothing has made more sense in the things that you've told me like all week. Of course you found a weird alien guy.
Do you have any big plans for the day?
I think I'm going to try again for the flower guy.
Okay.
Because I'm feeling much more energized than I was the last time I tried to do that. So I'm going to go.
And you've been a bread making fool lately.
I know. I actually, it's so funny that you said you wanted to make pita with Autumn, because I've been like kind of looking at my supply of flour, which is very, very low at the moment. But I was like, I really want to make pitas, because like I I actually made like chicken shawarma this week.
Nice. Okay.
Yes. And I was like, damn it, I don't have enough flour to make pitas. But anyway, so that's something that I definitely want to try at some point, and I think I might do that this week, because a 10-year-old who will probably be 11 by the time this comes out.
Whoa.
I know. Loves pita bread.
Of course, yeah. Pita bread is delicious.
Yeah.
Do
But yeah, apart from that, I've got some cleaning, and I got to make some. I bought a big box of tomatoes, so I got to process those, make and freeze soup, and make and freeze sauce.
Love it. Absolutely love
Yep.
it. Vacuum sealer changed our life. When I think it was right on quarantine when we got the vacuum sealer and like bought a deep freeze. We're gonna make gumbo for 18 years and put it all in the freezer and we will have gumbo. So yeah, we love doing stuff like that. We love making like a big pot of something and just putting it up, because it makes it so easy. Like, it's a Thursday night and like neither of us really want to cook. So like, oh, we have a bolognese sauce. Let's heat up some pasta and heat up some sauce. And now you have a delicious fucking meal that you made, 2 months ago or whatever. So
exactly. No, honestly, I've been doing that more and more, just because I love the convenience of it. Like there's some days where I'm just so exhausted, but I want to eat well.
Exactly. Yeah. And having those like prepared things are super, I mean, it's so useful, right?
Exactly. I don't have a deep freezer though, so I only have like my little freezer, so I have to be really, really smart with the kind of stuff I put in there. So yeah, but I started also making and freezing bread so that I have like fresh homemade bread whenever I want. Yes, which is really great.
I need to start freezing bread. I never think about that. That's like a thing.
It is a thing, and it works really well. Like after that, you just like let it thaw, but you can also like just pop it in the oven for like just a few minutes so that it's like warm.
Perfect.
Yep, exactly. Definitely something to do, I think, anyway.
I want to tell you about a documentary I watched yesterday that has that is strangely connected to Hannibal. Have you ever heard of Dr. Anne Burgess?
The name rings a bell, but I wouldn't be able to tell you who she is.
So she's like apparently this extremely famous is probably not a good word, but she's a very well-known woman who was in the 60s developed like she started listening to rape victims for the first time, sexual assault victims for the first time, and became and like organized all of this information in like with academic ways and wrote a book about it, and like started organizing like different methods for women to be able to report that and be believed and things like that. So she releases this book, and then she gets a random call in the early 80s from the FBI, and they're like, "Hey, we want you to come teach a class." And she's like, "Okay." So she goes to the FBI and she starts teaching this class on like listening to victims, and like obviously like the feedback was not great, right? Like it's a room full of men who were like, kind of joking around about the sexual assault thing, and they probably wanted it and things like that. But the more that she started like showing them the data, the more they started to believe. So they were starting to like look at these cases differently. And it's in the documentary, like the way this is presented is like, and I guess I knew this, but like seeing it, like seeing the fact that they would get reported sexual assault cases and be like, nope, not gonna investigate, just would put it to the side, right? Like horrifying. So her doing those classes at the FBI leads to her having a connection with Robert Ressler, who at the time was the head of the behavioral science unit, which was brand new and had no actual science behind it whatsoever. So if you've seen the show Mindhunters on Netflix, this is that, right? Like this is them learning how to talk to serial killers. So they were going in and interviewing the serial killers that they had captured and talking to them and getting this information and trying to figure out how to use that in order to catch more serial killers. Well, then they get this woman, this consultant, like not even an FBI agent, Dr. Anne Burgess, and she's like, "You guys are doing this all wrong." And she develops a like 57-page questionnaire, because obviously like they were just sitting down and having conversations with these people, But like she was like, no, you have to ask them the same questions so that we can get the correct data and we can start correlating all of this stuff.
We can standardize it.
Exactly.
More.
Yeah. And so she does that, which leads to the creation of their ability to actually put together like profiles of killers. Which then in like the 1980s, there was a ski mask rapist in South Louisiana. So she comes down and doesn't talk to any of really the police. In fact, the police were like, hey, you have someone, you called the FBI. I'm like, you have someone down here impersonating the FBI. Like, no, she's good. She's cool. Like, let her do what she wants. So she talks to all of the victims and develops this profile, which was used, like one of the cops in South Louisiana, like used the stuff from the profile 2 months later to catch the guy.
Wow.
Huge win. So this goes on for years and years and years. And they eventually realize like, hey, they're getting so many requests for profiles. They're like, we need to start teaching this to other people, not just the FBI. And like, so they wrote a book, and the book is called Sexual Homicide, Patterns and Motives. And that's the book that Silence of the Lambs is based on.
No. Oh my God.
Robert Ressler is the kind of the formative version of Jack Crawford. Which is kind of crazy. Like I was watching this documentary, I'm like, holy shit, this is not going to be literally about Hannibal. Oh, it's about Hannibal. Okay, it's about Hannibal. Excellent.
Don't you love it in life when like
so
things just kind of like line up this way? Like the serendipity of it all. I love that stuff. Like it tickles my brain in a way that like I can't even describe.
Right? Like it's unintentional. It's just like kismet, right? It's just like stuff lines up and it's just perfect. And then she goes on. She basically, and this entire time, by the way, that she's helping the FBI, she's got like 3 or 4 kids. She's got like a whole, like she's the dean of a nursing college. Like she's got these like 3 careers that she's doing. And then she retires from the FBI in the 90s, or like kind of stops taking cases basically. And then gets like pulled into the Menendez brothers trial. And like starts looking at it from the other side. And she starts, so she's, not only is she responsible for allowing this huge group of women to like talk about their sexual assault and like be able to be believed, she goes to the Menendez brothers and has a conversation with them and realizes like, oh, the press and the prosecution are like forming this as their motive is money. They wanted to kill their parents for the money, but actually both of them had been sexually assaulted. And they were, so this wasn't, they definitely killed the parents, but they did it for different reasons than we think. So which opened up like the ability for men to talk about being sexually assaulted. And then she goes on to be a consultant on the first Bill Cosby case. And it's just like,
oh, wow.
Jesus fucking Christ, how do you have this much time in your life, woman? And at the end, like, it's like now she's starting the same thing. Her granddaughter is working with her to do like data capture for the disappearance and murder of Indigenous women. And I'm just like, like this is the people that we should be idolizing.
Yeah.
But it's,
oh wow, I didn't know that was a thing, like that they were starting to actually like look into this, because it's been decades and anyway, I won't go into my conspiracy theory about that, because that's just, but I'm so happy that somebody is properly looking into this.
They showed just a brief interview with her and an Indigenous woman, and the woman was saying, these people just disappeared, and Burgess was like, oh yeah, absolutely, we've got a database with like 3,000 cases right now that we're working through. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is wild. But just like, not only with the connection with Hannibal, but just like, oh, finally a documentary that's like obviously it's a little salacious with the serial killer stuff, and they like, they had to play like serial killer tapes and all that stuff to be like, because documentary is going to documentary or whatever. But at the same time, it just felt so wholesome of like, here's this woman that I'd never heard of before. And in fact, like there's a big like magazine spread where they took a picture of everybody in the behavioral science units, and they had like mind hunters at the top, right? Like this big like profile piece. Nobody invited her to be in the picture. Like she's just not there.
Of course.
And she was like, that's not what I was there to do. She's like, I was just doing my work. But I'm like, I want to do anyway. So it's a very good documentary.
Yeah,
it's
really
very worth watching. Even though I just told you.
What's the name of the documentary?
That's a good question.
You're like, it's really worth watching. I'm like, okay, what's the name of it?
Mastermind, To Think Like a Killer.
Okay.
It's on Hulu. I think I just downloaded it, but it's on Hulu right now. Really, really good. Really, really solid documentary. We're
All
watching.
right, folks, go listen to that documentary and tell us what you think.
We're watching the chimp documentary on HBO, which is by the Tiger King people. And it's
oh my God.
In comparison feels so crazy exploitative to this one. Like just the way that they like follow people, and you can kind of tell like they interview people and they seem to get them comfortable, and then they like take footage from them not interviewing them. And it just feels like obviously they agreed and like signed on or whatever, and like they can get followed around by cameras, but just like the way it's presented is just real scummy.
Yeah, I mean, ethics in ethics in documentary making is a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Or sometimes not a thing.
That's so sad.
Right?
Or sometimes not a thing. Yes, exactly. Or lack of ethics. And Hannibal would find it very rude. I'm just saying.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he would find it very rude.
Hannibal and Autumn have something in common in that they would probably never want to be on camera to be interviewed about anything. Like Autumn has always said, like if a tornado hit, she would never be that woman going like, and then the twister came out of nowhere. Like she was like, I don't need to be on TV. I think Hannibal's the same way. Like he would just not want to be on TV to be interviewed by the local news station.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, like that is also a thing that I would definitely. So I have been on TV, like explaining something like that happened, and I would never do it again. I've seen the way that like news crews actually and journalists actually like take advantage of people who have lived like terrible things, and I would never do it again. I would never let my child do it, so long as I can, obviously. But yeah, would never do it.
It's it's just interesting, I think, to I don't know. I just don't trust the news. Like, I don't trust the news people anymore. I know that sounds so conspiracy and like right winged. Like, I don't trust the news, but like also I don't trust the news. Yeah,
exactly. It's interesting because like there's two kinds of I don't trust the news.
Right? Yeah. There's definitely two different kinds.
Yes, there's two different kinds of I don't trust the news, and I am definitely one of them, and absolutely not the other. So I feel that. Oh my God.
I wanted to add, I think this is the first time we recorded since, or maybe I just forgot it last time, but Nell in the MOTW Discord had something for us that I wanted to add to the notes real quick.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was good.
Otherwise, are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. I'm having my coffee. My voice is normal again.
Yeah.
It's great.
Warmed up the pipes.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh my God, I sound like Gillian Anderson in the last few years.
Those cigarettes really got
Said with love. I love her, by the way.
Oh my God. When I get bored, so like last night we're just kind of like casually rewatching the show The Expanse, and I've seen it like 3 or 4 times and it's really good, but like also like some of the in between bits I'm like, I'm gonna look at my phone, so I was like scrolling through the X-Files tag on Tumblr like I do, and just like reblogging Gillian Anderson pictures. Like just, and then realized like maybe I shouldn't be doing this on the Monster Wheat profile. Maybe this is a little too crushing. We have an X-Files podcast, but like there's not a single picture of David Duchovny on there anywhere, so maybe I should realign.
That's kind of the beauty of like bisexuality for me. Like I love them both so much. Like I can't deal. Like when they're both on screen, like talking to each other, I just like I don't know where to look.
It's too much. Yeah.
It's too much.
It's like Jensen and Danielle. Like just take it down a notch, guys. Just take it down.
I know, right? Like stop doing this to us. Although I have to say that I do find Danielle a lot more attractive than Jetson.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like
even as like
level.
not even as like a straight person who just finds him a very attractive man. Like she's got so much going on, and he just is an attractive man. Like we've seen a lot of those. She has like
there you go.
She's a lot like Ruth, right? Like where she just has this like face, this interesting face. Like that. I feel like that's what like people who recruit models look for, like interesting faces. So.
I was so sad. I was supposed to have like a picture with Ruth when I went to New Jersey, and she had to cancel. And I'm so sad that I didn't get to see her.
One day.
Boston, maybe?
Boston, maybe. Yeah. They haven't announced anything for Boston, but DJ told us that he was going to be there. Like, I was like, oh, I got this. I didn't even realize.
Bestie?
Yeah. I didn't even realize until somebody said it. in the chat, they were like, "Oh yeah, like they haven't announced anybody for that." And I was like, "Maybe he won't be there." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure he said he would be in this podcast." So we got the scoop.
Yeah, there you go. You can just like text your bestie now. It's all good.
It's all good. That's what I'm going to do. Just text my bestie. It's so weird. It must be so odd because I've had so many people tell us that they are meeting him and being like, "Oh, we loved your episode of Monster of the Week." And I'm like, that dude has been on fucking like 15 major Hollywood movies. He's been on like a
Yes.
huge like AAA Amazon like vehicle. You know what I'm saying? Like he's done stuff, and to have people be like, "I love this podcast you did with these two nerds," like it's got to be. I'm sure it's fun to talk about something that's not like what you normally talk about, but at the same time, it's got to be like, who the fuck are these guys?
Exactly. I mean, it must be one of those things where you're like, this was a good decision, a bit risky, but a good decision. Like it paid off,
Yeah, so strange. I boosted him up in the charts. Like he got that Monster of the Week bump. So.
I know. Good for him.
Good for him. Did well.